across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this afternoon. There's loads to discuss, including those Waterlooville protests, the fact that a local council was not consulted about the fact that migrants were going to move into a new facility. Over 1,000 people protested. We'll be speaking to one of them. In fact, the only elected councillor who was there, George Madwick. He'll be coming up a little bit later on the show, as will Baroness Foster, Arlene Foster, the former leader of Northern Ireland, the former First Minister. She is one of a number of members of the House of Lords who think that what Keir Starmer is doing in regard to recognising a Palestinian state is illegal, that it's not with international law. We'll talk about that as well. We'll also talk to a Labour MP and a Conservative MP about all of that. How much money do you have in your account at the end of the month? A lot of people got paid today. It's the last day of the month, of course. Lots of people going off on holiday, on kids being around causes you got to pay for kids clubs and more things that they want. The ice cream van comes, you got to buy them an ice cream. There are always things, there's always money going out of your account. But in the cost of living crisis, could you afford, for example, if your washing machine breaks down? We have a big new survey of the fact that so few people have any disposable income. After all the bills are gone, how much money do you have left in your account? We'll talk to the political editor of The Sun on Sunday about all the big political stories today. A new guest coming up as well, a retired prison governor called Mark Hammersley. He's going to take us through the story about prisons getting an AI profiling. This is an idea to avert violence in our prisons. Huge problems there. We'll talk about the sport and take a look inside tomorrow's Sun, as well as we usually do, as well as speaking to Brendan O'Neill and getting the latest on Kevin O'Sullivan's exclusive last night on the veterans who face eviction from council housing. Why is it we can find housing for migrants, but we can't house our own veterans who have served this country? Loads to discuss. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note as well. Dead easy. Same way you send a voice note to anybody else. Just send it to our main number. You also can send me a WhatsApp text message to the main number or give me a ring on the main number. The main number, of course, is 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, big story on the front page of The Times today about some of Britain's most prominent lawyers warning the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, that his government's pledge to recognise a state of Palestine, that's the big political row at the moment, well, it risks breaking international law. Of course, we know that Lord Hermer, who is the Attorney General and I think the most dangerous man in government, is a stickler for international law. International law is the reason we gave away the Chagos Islands. He would argue international law is something that we have to abide by. Well, what if they wouldn't be abiding by international law by recognising a state of Palestine, rewarding Hamas terrorists, many people argue, including Emily Damari, who was a hostage, taken hostage by Hamas terrorists on the 7th of October 2023. Someone who was one of those 251 hostages, 50 of them still in captivity, still being held by Hamas terrorists. We think about 20 of them are alive, but we don't know for sure. Well, there's something called the Montevideo Convention, a treaty signed in 1933. That is something that many senior lawyers, many people who are in the House of Lords as well, think would be broken by Keir Starmer if he actually recognises the state of Palestine. Earlier today, the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, he was asked about this at a small business conference. This is what Jonathan Reynolds said about this controversy.
Requests that all hostages must be released and that Hamas can play no future role in the governance of Gaza or a Palestinian state are long-standing. Now, we don't negotiate with terrorists, and Hamas are terrorists, and that's why we don't get into a to and fro with them as to what we want them to do. That's absolute in terms of our requests. What we are seeking to do is use the moment of recognition of a Palestinian state in a way that allows us to genuinely try and move this conflict forward, end it not just in the short term, but for the long term as well. Of course, get aid into Gaza, which is absolutely key, but use this moment to try and genuinely say what we have witnessed is so appalling, so horrific, the suffering on both sides, that we have to try, surely, and move this on for good. And that requires a two-state solution. That is why recognition of a Palestinian state is so important.
Jonathan Reynolds there, the business secretary, talking about that. He says we don't negotiate with terrorists. Well, the National Security Advisor Jonathan Powell has made a career of negotiating with terrorists, including the IRA in the 1990s. He's written many books about it. So it is absolutely nonsense to say that the UK government doesn't negotiate with terrorists. It does. It has. It has on numerous occasions. And I would imagine there are some back channels between our government and Hamas. I don't know for sure, but I'd be really, really surprised if there are not. Graeme Stringer is the MP for Blackley and Middleton South. He is a Labour MP and also a member of Labour Friends of Israel. Graeme, thank you for joining me today. I wonder what you make of this row and the fact that there are so many members of, about 40 members, and some of them very eminent lawyers, in the House of Lords who are saying that Keir Starmer could possibly be breaking international law by moving in this direction. What do you think?
Well, I'm not in a position to judge on international law. I'm surprised the Attorney General has become invisible on this matter. He's made some extraordinary rulings on international law, and my understanding is that he's demanded every policy is seen by him and okayed by him before it goes forward. I think he just likes interfering and pursuing his own policies.
I mean, Lord Hermer, who you talk about there, Graeme, has a long-standing and vociferous support for the Palestinian cause as well.
Precisely. And he's had a very particular and peculiar view of international law and its relationship to UK law. He's called people Nazis who think that British law, UK law, should be superior to international law. His judgment really seems to me to be wayward. As I say, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to get involved in a legal argument. It's just interesting that he's quiet on this matter where he's been over-visible on other issues.
It's a very good point.
This has been determined really by internal Labour Party politics. There's been a lot of pressure put on Labour MPs to do something. This is something. Those Labour MPs have put pressure on the Prime Minister, and he has reversed the policy on fairly immediate recognition of a state that doesn't exist, doesn't have borders. And I think it's not helpful. Israel is our ally. They were blindsided by this decision. It's going to make us less influential rather than more influential in the work towards any peaceful solution to the problems in the Middle East.
Are you ashamed of Keir Starmer doing this? Do you think that's the wrong thing?
I think it's the wrong thing. I'm not averse to U-turns. If you've got a wrong policy, you should change it for a better policy if you can. But I think we're changing this policy for a worse policy that will reduce our influence. It will make us appear to be, and possibly in reality be, less reliable as an ally, not just to Israel, but to any other country who are our allies. So I don't think it's a good policy. I don't think it will help ease the humanitarian situation in Gaza. I think the relatives of British hostages have got it right when they say they have been let down, and it is giving in one case, as I've just said, to people in the Labour Party, but also to Hamas. So I think it's changing the policy to a worse policy, which is a mistake.
Graeme, I was really interested by what you said there earlier in regard to the fact that a lot of this is to do with internal struggles within the Labour Party. What I have observed is the fact that Keir Starmer has U-turned, for example, on winter fuel allowances. He capitulated to the backbenches, certainly on welfare. The bill looks nothing like it looked like when it was brought in. In fact, it has nothing now to do with personal independence payments. A few days ago, in fact less than a week ago, Keir Starmer essentially said this recognition of Palestine, which has been long-term Labour policy, it was policy in their manifesto, has to be part of a process. Then a few days later he calls an emergency cabinet meeting the day after he didn't discuss it, as we know, with President Trump. I mean, I wonder, in your estimation, is this more to do with the Middle East or is this more to do with Westminster?
I think it's more to do, as I said before, with the internal politics of the the Labour Party, whereas many of our supporters, particularly those who are Muslims, some other people who are genuinely concerned about the terrible humanitarian situation in Gaza, have put a lot of pressure on. They want to do something, and this is the wrong thing to do. But you list a number of policies, some of which I think should have been changed, some of which I think shouldn't have been changed. What it indicates to me is that there isn't deep thinking going on before policies are arrived at. If you have a thought-out position and you can argue the case, then you can be robust in the defence of it. It is much more difficult to be robust in the defence of something if you haven't bottomed all the arguments in favour of it. And that was certainly the case on the welfare reforms, the winter fuel allowance. The arguments put forward, in my opinion, were extremely weak and ill thought out.
Yeah. It's interesting, one of our texters, Jane, has said the Prime Minister rushed into this. He followed Macron. If he and his cabinet had no understanding of this, they should all resign. They don't seem to have much understanding of UK matters either. There is a major body of opinion within a lot of our viewers and listeners here at Talk, Graeme, that Keir Starmer wants to be seen as an international statesman, that is an important aspect of his premiership, and that actually he's neglecting at least the detail of things that are, of many aspects that are important to people here at home. Do you think that's a fair assessment, Graeme?
I don't really. I mean, it's an impossible job being the Prime Minister. Mm-hmm. He has to deal with international trade. He has to deal with difficult situations in the world, like the Middle East and Russia and Ukraine. He needs to spend time on that. He needs to spend time on domestic issues where mistakes have been made. It's a terribly difficult job. I think the problem is not that he is spending too much time on international affairs, or it is that a lot of the policies that are being arrived at are shallow. Mm-hmm. I can't think of a fairer way of saying that. And that is what leads to the change of policy. If you've got deep policies, then the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions can get on with doing what is her job. The Foreign Secretary can get on with doing his job. But if your policies aren't thought through and bottom, then you're going to be left with the Prime Minister coming to firefight problems, whether it's internal Labour Party policies or whether it is just dealing with really very difficult international situations.
Graeme, thank you. That's Graeme Stringer there, the Labour MP for Blackley and Middleton South. Appreciate you joining us this afternoon. It's been a big news day, and one thing that has happened is that it has been the funeral of Lord Tebbit. Now, we're speaking to Matt Vickers, MP for the Conservatives, a little bit later on. He's been at that funeral today. Lord Tebbit, of course, was the chairman of the Conservative Party and indeed the Employment Secretary. He very famously said that his father, when he didn't have work, got on his bike and got a job. David in Exeter has given us a ring, and I know you worked with Lord Tebbit. David, what would you like to say about him today?
Well, I'd the sort of privilege, really, of working with Norman for a number of years around the referendum period and post the referendum under the Theresa May administration, where Norman and I shared Margaret Thatcher's view on defence and security policy. And a lot of the work that Norman and I were doing was initially lobbying Vote Leave to put defence and security on the agenda to no avail, and then subsequent to try and get some traction within the Tory backbenches to be more coherent and really for them to understand what Maggie's policy was where European Defence and Security Union was concerned. And that proved incredibly difficult because the majority of Tory MPs and even ministers, I've got to say, and I met several that were in-service ministers on lobbying this issue and some ex-ministers. And I've got to say a lot of them were really in the dark on what was going on from a national perspective to then to be on an EU perspective. But Norman was adamant and absolutely adamant that Maggie's policy was no she famously said 3 no's, didn't she?
No, yeah, indeed, yeah.
The first no was no to the currency union. The second no was no to European Defence and Security Union, or at the time when Maggie was pitched it in 1984 by Jacques Delors, it was common defence and security. It hadn't really progressed to being anything other than a military union, not a full defence union that we now see with Ursula von der Leyen, where it's all-encompassing. But Norman's point was, that was Maggie's policy, and we need to get some traction with it. And we know, I could name drop. We went to some of the big hitters in the Tory party, and a majority of them, to be fair, run. And
perhaps you could just tell us, David, a bit about Norman Tebbit himself and why you admired him as a man.
I admired him because he was absolutely forthright and honest. If you spoke to him, you would get, or when we were in discussions on stuff, you would get absolutely coherent, quick, rapid, succinct answers, the likes of which you would struggle elsewhere in the Commons. You would get in the Lords, if you talk to, senior ex-military officers. But Norman was, I kid you not, and make no bones about it, absolutely outstanding, because he had the expertise and experience across a whole field of things, particularly the industrial side of defence and security with Rolls-Royce and BAE. But what I absolutely found so refreshing with him was that, look, even if you didn't agree, you would get honesty.
Yeah. And that is what is
quickly, and he wouldn't. Yeah. His way of articulating things, Peter, was so fantastic. You didn't get waffle and hyperbole and patronising tosh like you get with a lot of politicians. You would get quick, rapid sense.
And that honesty, David, is something that is severely lacking with so many of our MPs. David, thank you for your tribute there to Lord Tebbit. Norman Tebbit. We'll hear more from Matt Vickers a little bit later on in the programme. He's been at the funeral today. Thank you to so many people who've been in touch about the stories we've been talking about. Jenny in Bicester says Lord Hermer either gave Keir advice that his action broke international law and he chose to ignore it, or he is incompetent and he allowed Keir to place the UK in a position where we break international law. Either way, Lord Hermer's position is untenable. I wonder, I love these people who say, oh, well, a lawyer says it, or, a legal opinion says this. Well, it doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't, it doesn't mean it's an argument. It doesn't mean it's based, of course, on many different aspects of the law, but it doesn't necessarily mean that is correct in itself. And Lord Hermer, his opinion, clearly, is that Palestine should be recognised as a state. That has been his position for a very, very long time. We're talking about a man who has represented all sorts of people like Shamima Begum and Jerry Adams, who's now the Attorney General of this country. So I think we know what his opinion is. Thank you to the texter. He says, Mr. Stringer, Graeme Stringer is the only decent Labour MP. Well done him. And one from Brad in Cambridge who says, oh, the delightful irony that Mr. Law himself, Starmer, may be about to break the law. By the way, I have a lot of time for Arlene Foster, says Brad in Cambridge. I do too. She's joining us very, very shortly here on Talk, although we're going to talk to George Madwick in a second. He was the only elected politician who was at the Waterlooville protest last night. We'll look at that. Locals packing the streets in protest after the Home Office has secretly plotted to move in asylum seekers into £250,000 flats. Britain 2025. Stay with us here on Talk.
he could have kicked him in the body, kicking somebody in the head. If I was a senior detective investigating that, I think the problem is you're handing victim cards to that person, from them becoming the
in the heat
villain.
of the moment.
The heat of the moment, and we've all been. I've been there with a red mist. If you're involved in violence like that, where people suddenly attack you, 2 of the colleagues have been taken out, and you're suddenly on your own, the red mist descends, and you're sort of fighting for your life. So it is very hard to criticise when that has happened.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Todd Davison in Cambridge, who has texted to say, "Afternoon, Peter. May God rest Lord Tebbit's soul. I'm proud to consider myself an aficionado. I've met him, communicated with him in writing, and found we agreed in so many things. We both have and had a disabled spouse to look after, and I was able to draw upon his own experiences. Would he have been a suitable replacement for Mrs. Thatcher? I think a lot of people would have liked that, actually. And of course, he was so dedicated to his wife Margaret, who was injured very, very severely in the Brighton bomb in 1984. The IRA terrorists taking away her ability to function by herself, and of course Norman Tebbit was a very, very dedicated husband to her. Would he have been a suitable replacement for Mrs. Thatcher? Absolutely, but the Tory wets had other ideas, and therefore it was just a matter of time before the party fell foul of an electorate that demanded so much more. Regards, Tad. Well, thank you, Tad, and we're talking about another political dispute at the moment. This is a huge protest in Portsmouth that happened last night. This is locals packing streets of Waterlooville in protest after the Home Office secretly plotted to move asylum seekers into £250,000 flats. Let's take a look at one protester who attended the protest last night in Portsmouth.
We did not consent to them, and we did not vote for them. This action to house illegals in Waterlooville is about as undemocratic as it gets. We demand the deportation of every illegal migrant. Send them home! Send them home!
So that was the protest just outside Portsmouth. Well, the only elected politician who was there was George Madwick, who's a Reform UK councillor for Polesgrove in Portsmouth. George, many people were there. Their views very, very clear, but of course they weren't consulted on this plan, and obviously there was anger there.
Absolutely. It was the biggest protest I've ever known locally. I mean, there was upwards of 2,000 people there, which is incredible. But you're right, people are angry and upset. And these aren't these stereotypical far-right protesters that you always hear about. This is families. This is women and single parents that are terrified of their kids. This proposal was to put migrants in accommodation that was right next to a school in the middle of the town centre, Waterlooville town centre, where there's early learning facilities. And this protest was actually organised by local parents, and it was so wildly attended.
In terms of what the people want, is there any sense that the council or government will listen to them? They're very clear in what they want, and this was an entirely peaceful protest, wasn't it, George?
It was an incredibly peaceful protest. Did you know what? Out of all the protests that I've known of, this has probably been the most energetic, enthusiastic protest I've seen. Everyone was singing and dancing and getting their voices heard. It was incredibly peaceful. There was one moment, which I know you've got on your screen now, where someone from the pro-refugee camp turned up with a placard and literally in the middle of the room held it up, and that got a small reaction from about 20 people. And there was no violence or anything, but it got a small reaction. The police grabbed them and ushered them off really quickly, and it was really well controlled, and it went back to the protest. But yeah, other than that, it was great, and there was such a diverse mix of people, and the community was there. It was really positive.
What is the actual plan here? Because we've read about and been told about the secret plot to relocate 35 asylum seekers to a brand new apartment development. That sparked this protest. Just tell us more about that and what could be happening.
Absolutely. So yeah, we heard about this from the Home Office, and they were looking at acquiring 19 basically brand new accommodation complexes. This value of these places, £250,000 each, and they were looking at putting 35 new migrants to the area into those accommodation, and the locals found it was unacceptable. When we're in the middle of a social housing crisis...
Well, I was just about to ask you about that, George, because you are a local councillor. What you will be doing for the people in Paulsgrove, of course, is trying to find many of them accommodation, and this is, like so many parts of the country, unlike what Keir Starmer seems to think, there is a social housing crisis.
It's a disaster, and in my ward of Paulsgrove, it's the second highest social housing area in the entire city. It's desolate, and we've got people that are on the waiting list for 6, 7, 8 years. I've currently got a family of 7 people in a 2-bedroom accommodation that are looking to move. There is just nothing available. We've got homeless people, including veterans, may I add, which always upsets me, literally on the street outside sleeping in our town centre. This is what is upsetting people, and moving more migrants into accommodation which could be used, or should be used, should I say, as social housing for local people, is being delegated to people that come here through illegal methods that are unchecked and undocumented, and these people can now just walk out into the town centre amongst us all. We don't know if they're criminals or whether they're good people, and that's the point. We don't know, and until we do, there needs to be some control on this.
The MP for the area wasn't there, the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, but she said, "I'd like to thank the thousands of peaceful protesters who came out this evening to tell the government that Waterlooville says no. The British people have had enough. The invasion must end." She'd previously labelled the government's plans as utterly inappropriate and got a petition with 9,000 signatures. What happens now, George, do you think?
I think, first of all, we should congratulate Suella for being so brave and coming out. She's the first MP in our area to actually speak about this topic. The Labour Liberal MPs have been silent. Our local council leaders have been silent. So kudos to her for coming out and putting her name behind it. She wasn't there, but good on her for putting her name behind it. But what do we do now? I mean, that's a big question. At the end of the day, the Labour government, they promised in their manifesto that they would resolve this problem. And just yesterday, we had almost 900 people come to the shores again. You know, I know what Reform would do if we were in power, but we're not in power. We're not going to be in power for a few years. So at the moment, we're relying on this Labour government. And hopefully, these protests that are now nationwide, this is not an isolated incident anymore. These are now nationwide, and hopefully they're listening and listening very carefully, because the people are unhappy.
George, thank you. That's George Madwick there, the Reform UK councillor in Portsmouth for Paulsgrove, the area there. Lots more to come on this. What do you think about this protest, the fact that people are making their voice heard because migrants could well be moved into these £250,000 apartments when there are people locals who are waiting on social housing waiting lists? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We're going to talk to the former First Minister of Northern Ireland, Baroness Foster, Arlene Foster, in a second about this letter that she has signed in regard to Keir Starmer possibly breaking international law on the Middle East. She's coming up in just a few minutes here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has got in touch, including Sean in Bridlington. He says, I would like the UK to recognise Taiwan long before it recognises the terrorist state of Palestine. Cliff in Berkshire says, a serious question for you. Do you think our nation has become more polarised as we supposedly become more tolerant? Personally, I've never known the people of the UK to be so intolerant of other people's views they don't agree with. Cliff, I think you're right. I also think there's a cumulative effect here of being tolerant for a long time and then that tolerance breaking down. I think there are a number of people who have been tolerant of other people. I think there are also a number of immigrants who have integrated really, really well. I think there are people over the last 40, 50, 60 years who have certainly had British values in their mind, who have come to this country, who have become British and certainly kept our values. And I think there are some people, especially more recent migrants, who really haven't. Part of that is because some of their culture doesn't mean that the British values are uppermost in their minds. Sometimes it means that sometimes it's because there are problems with integration. Multiculturalism, I think, has failed. I think there are a lot of reasons around this as well. Numbers, sheer numbers as well, are a big, big issue as well. How can you integrate to society that can't actually, bring you together, that can't actually absorb you? Brad says, I would like to know what our highly intelligent Foreign Secretary is doing while Starmer is dealing with all these overseas issues, says Brad in Cambridge. Well, Brad, of course, celebrity mastermind contestant David Lammy has been at the United Nations with a hand of history on his shoulder. And Leslie says, how can a pretend solicitor have an opinion on Palestine? Why did Hamas thank Starmer, says Leslie. We're going to talk about all of that in a second. Let's just remind ourselves of what Jonathan Reynolds said on the Palestinian issue earlier today.
Requests that all hostages must be released and that Hamas can play no future role in the governance of Gaza or a Palestinian state are long-standing. Now, we don't negotiate with terrorists, and Hamas are terrorists, and that's why we don't get into a to and fro with them as to what we want them to do. That's absolute in terms of our requests. What we are seeking to do is use the moment of recognition of a Palestinian state in a way that allows us to genuinely try and move this conflict forward, end it not just in the short term, but for the long term as well. Of course, get aid into Gaza, which is absolutely key, but use this moment to try and genuinely say what we have witnessed is so appalling, so horrific, the suffering on both sides, that we have to try, surely, and move this on for good. And that requires a two-state solution. That is why recognition of a Palestinian state is so important.
That's the Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds talking about this, and a fascinating story on the front of the Times newspaper today. The headline, Palestine vow breaks the law, claim top lawyers. Letter signed by 40 peers sending a warning to the Prime Minister. This is some of Britain's most prominent lawyers warning Sir Keir Starmer that his government's pledge to recognise a Palestinian state risks breaking international law. This is 40 members of the House of Lords. We're hoping to speak to one of them in a second. That say that a Palestinian state would not meet the criteria for recognition as set out under a convention signed in 1933. It's been sent to Lord Hermer, who is the Attorney General and the government's top legal advisor. He is a long-standing supporter of the Palestinian cause as well. The signatories are pointing out that Starmer's pledge risks undermining the government's commitment that international law goes absolutely to the heart of its foreign policy, and if it does, and if they're breaking international law by doing this, well, then they're in serious difficulty. Let's speak to Baroness Foster, Arlene Foster, who is the former First Minister of Northern Ireland. She's one of the people who has signed this letter. Arlene, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Peter. Really good to join you.
Why have you signed this letter?
Well, I was very concerned when I heard what happened in relation to the statement from Keir Starmer, because automatically I thought this has been a complete change, because up until now he's been very much holding the line on we will recognise Palestine at the appropriate time. And I have seen nothing to suggest that this is the appropriate time. And then some of my very senior legal colleagues in the House of Lords came forward and said, hold on a minute, what about the Montevideo Convention, which very clearly says that there are certain conditions that have to be met when you're recognising new states. Okay. Yep. There are 4 of those. The first is to have a permanent population. The second is to have a defined territory. The third is to have an effective government. And the fourth is to have the capacity of that government to engage with other states. And clearly, when you look at those 4 measures, Peter, there are real difficulties in recognising a Palestinian state if that is the case. Mm-hmm. And we have been told by the Attorney General, Lord Hermer, and indeed many others in the front bench of the Labour government, that they are totally wedded to international law. And we've heard that on a number of occasions, I'm sure you will recall as well, whether it's to do with veterans in Northern Ireland, whether it's to do with women's rights.
The Chagos Islands as well. We were told that happened because of international law.
Yeah, and we could talk for hours about that. And we've told that they have to have international law respected, and there cannot be a pick and mix in relation to international law. And if that is the case, Peter, why then are we going against international law in relation to this issue? And I think it's a very concerning issue to be going against international law on. And I've also noticed that France has been challenged about this by some of their senior lawyers in France. They're saying, again, what about international law? So it seems that the political pressure that Keir Starmer is under, mostly from his backbenchers, it has to be said, and from some outside the Labour Party, he has given way. And I think that that is very, very concerning for peace in the Middle East. And we all want to see peace in the Middle East. Everybody wants to see, all right-thinking people want to see the end of what has been a horrific time for Israel and for Gaza and for individual citizens who live in that area. And we all want to see peace coming about, but it's not going to come about if you're doing something which is against international law and at the same time saying you have to abide by international law.
Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, has been someone who has represented Shamima Begum, he's represented Gerry Adams, he's been a long-standing supporter of the Palestinian cause.
Yes.
This is a legal opinion that you're putting forward. He's putting forward other legal opinions. Do you think he's going to listen to this letter, or is he simply going to ignore it?
Well, I think it will be very difficult for him to ignore, because whatever about Arlene Foster signing the letter, there are some very senior KCs who have signed that letter. And I think he should sit up and take notice of those people. Lord Panic, Lord Verderama, Lord Fawkes have all signed that letter along with others. And we feel that given that we have been told decisions around Chagos, decisions around veterans are because of international law, then I feel he has to come forward and give an explanation as to why he is actually avoiding international law on this hugely important issue.
Tell me, you mentioned earlier on about those internal pressures. We've had this sort of slightly weird kind of week or 10 days in regard to Keir Starmer, where he has said, right, it's Labour Party policy, it's in their manifesto, it's long-standing policy, as we all know, that Labour wants to recognise a Palestinian state. He said we'll do that at the right time and under the right circumstances. Then he has a meeting with President Trump on Monday where he apparently doesn't even mention that he's about to announce that he is going to have this plan to recognise a Palestinian state. I just wonder, and I said this to Graeme Stringer earlier on in the programme, I wonder if this is more to do with the welfare bill and with internal problems within the Labour Party and the tail wagging the dog in regard to backbenchers. You're in Parliament. Do you think this is really about the Middle East, or is this about Keir Starmer's position?
Well, I think sadly it's about his position, and sadly it's about the pressure that he's coming under from very strident people to his left. And there are now people in the cabinet as well who are saying that we need to recognise Palestine as a state. But it's not just the fact that he's breaking international law with this determination, but it's also, Peter, if you look at the statement, normally when you place conditions on someone to bring about something happening, you place it on the people who are seeking the statehood. So in other words, the Palestinians. In this case, we're putting the conditions on Israel. So I fail to see why Hamas would release the hostages when they don't need to. And in fact, my worry, and I know it's something that Emily Damari, one of the British hostages, has articulated far better than I ever could, is that this is actually going to prolong what's happening in Gaza. And that is the real tragedy in all of this, because my goodness, I had the opportunity, and I do want to share this with you and your listeners, I had the opportunity to meet and listen to two hostages a couple of weeks ago in Parliament, Peter. And I mean, you know me, I'm a pretty tough person. It was a really difficult listen to what they had been put through and what was still happening to the hostages that are still being kept under Gaza in tunnels. And I think people have literally forgotten about those people. They are still alive, sadly not all of them, and they're being tortured on a daily basis. And yet here we have a government that doesn't even put an onus on Hamas to release those hostages. They don't have to release the hostages for Palestine to be recognised as a state, if you read through the statement that the Prime Minister has put forward. So I think that's incredibly sad that we have forgotten, we in the United Kingdom, through our government, not those of us who continue to support the position, but our government has decided that they're, we're not going to bother putting the pressure on around the hostages. Now, he will say in his statement that he said the hostages need to be released, and he did. But it's not a condition, Peter.
Yeah.
It's not a condition, and I think that's incredibly sad.
I think the hostages you might have been listening to were Keith and Aviva Seagull, is that correct?
That is absolutely right.
I interviewed them for this programme. They're two incredibly brave people. I want to ask you just before you go, Arlene, today is a horrible anniversary. It's the 35th anniversary of the Tory MP Ian Gow assassinated by the Provisional IRA. It's also the day that Norman Tebbit has his funeral has occurred today as well. He was quite a tough customer, certainly, and someone who suffered at the hands of the IRA, as you and your family suffered at the hands of the IRA in a different way, Arlene. And I just wonder what your thoughts of Norman Tebbit are today.
Well, I was incredibly sad when I learned about his death. Of course, he's been out of the public eye now for some time because he dedicated his life, his later life, to looking after his dear wife. And her injuries were quite severe, as you know, as a result of that bomb in Brighton. And, but for that, Norman Tebbit could have gone on to greater things. But he dedicated his life to his wife. And I think that says more about the man than anything else. And I think he was a great stalwart for the Conservative Party, but more than that, for unionism and for victims of terrorism. I know he spent time with some of the victims groups here in Northern Ireland, and they took great heart from that he spent time with them, and a man of his stature would take the time to speak with them and share his views and opinions. So it is a very sad day today. Unfortunately, as you know only too well, Peter, there is an anniversary every day in Northern Ireland for those who were the subject of terrorism of all kinds. And it is very, very sad that Norman Tebbit has been buried today. But his memory is a strong one, and I think he will be remembered for a long, long time.
Arlene, thank you. That is Baroness Foster there, the former First Minister of Northern Ireland, speaking to us about that, about Norman Tebbit, of course, but also this possible breach of international law, a claim of top lawyers and members of the House of Lords. Got some breaking news here on Talk as well, and that is that Jaguar Land Rover's chief executive has announced his decision to retire. This is Adrienne Mills' resignation, coming just weeks after it was reported sales plummeted by 97.5% of Jaguars after a fierce backlash after the brand's woke rebrand that features pink concept cards and catwalk models. Unsurprisingly, go woke, go broke. You can see some of the absolutely ill-fated ad on TV now. Create exuberant. And it was something that, of course, led to a nearly 100% plummet in sales. So Jaguar Land Rover's chief executive, Adrienne Mills, retiring, announcing that. We'll talk to the political editor of The Sun on Sunday in just a second about all the political stories around today, not just the Palestinian story, but also the nurses threatening industrial action and, of course, those migrant hotel protests as well. Stay with us here on Talk.
I think what we were just talking about, it is the donors, it's the rich, it's the elites, it's the fancy people in the media, no offense, who are all on the other side of the people. I wrote Adios America, which I do think influenced Trump's immigration policy quite strongly. And, you know, as I said in that book, I've never seen an issue where you have the people so much on one side and the elites and the politicians directly opposed to them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Sean in Bridlington says that he would have liked to have seen President Tebbit, never mind Prime Minister Tebbit. Well, we'll be speaking to a Conservative MP in a few minutes' time who's just come from that funeral of Lord Tebbit, actually. And Tristan in Bedford says, it's not also that our so-called Prime Minister does not know domestic politics to me and many others. He outright avoids domestic politics in any way possible. And him choosing to do this total deflection of acting as our Prime Minister will only affect him in the local elections as well as national elections. Well, let's get the thoughts on the politics of the day from the political editor of The Sun on Sunday, Kate Ferguson, who's with us now in the studio. Hi, Kate.
Nice to be here.
It's a tough day for the government. 25,000 migrant channel crossings this year. An absolute record, a bad record, despite Labour's crackdown promise. Where does this leave them?
Yeah, I mean, each month brings bad news with our borders, and this is a particularly grim toll. Keir Starmer came in pledging to stop the boats like Rishi did and smash the gangs, but he's totally failed so far. We see those numbers go up and up and up. The PM makes a big deal of these kind of deals he's striking with other countries, these returns deals to deport people. But it is clear, number one, we're not deporting enough people. And number two, there is just not a deterrent. So these boats are coming onto the shores of Dover day after day after day. They're packed and there is no sign of them stopping.
The one in, one out policy was meant to be the great panacea. We've heard very little about it in the last, well, really since it was announced. Is it convincing anybody, do you think, Kate?
No, basically, people will not be convinced until those boats stop, until we see those numbers drastically reduced. So it doesn't matter what deals you strike, what amendments you table to bits of legislation, really how many speeches you make. The proof is in the pudding. This is one of those political scandals and crises which is really visible, right? We see it every day in those pictures of the dinghies filled with migrants. We see it every day with those Deliveroo bikes outside migrant hotels.
And The Sun has been doing some great campaigning on that as well and getting some movement on that.
A lot of investigative work from my colleagues at The Sun on that. And we see it actually every day in the tax bills we get, which is paying for these huge asylum costs and hotel costs. So until the numbers change, they get absolutely slashed. No one will believe what their politicians tell them because, to be fair, we've all heard it before.
You talked very specifically there in regard to the asylum issue in the Home Office, sparking fury after emerging in Waterlooville that, this is around Portsmouth, that they're secretly plotting to relocate 35 asylum seekers to a brand new apartment development there. The flats themselves costing something like £250,000 each. I just want to play you a clip now of one of the protesters of what he was saying last night, and then we'll get Kate's reaction to this. This was a huge protest, over 1,000 people there. Let's just play the clip of what the protester was saying.
We did not consent to them and we did not vote for them. This action to house illegals in Waterlooville is about as undemocratic as it gets. We demand the deportation of every illegal migrant.
So that was in Hampshire last night. We've seen quite a number of these protests popping up. That was a particularly large one. We spoke to George Madwick, the Reform UK councillor, who was there. Will the government and the Home Office be taking notice of this, Kate?
Well, they'll certainly be taking notice. It obviously is a worrying trend for them that you're seeing these protests starting to emerge outside migrant hotels. The reality is it's very hard to know what they can do. So while you're still getting those big numbers coming over, you've got to house them somewhere. They're under a kind of legal obligation to house them. So there's migrant hotels being filled up, or apartment blocks being filled up, or we're seeing increasing numbers move into kind of HMOs on people's streets, which is...
social housing,
yeah, another big scandal waiting to erupt. I mean, it's clear that it's becoming a kind of hotbed of resentment for a lot of people in this country. It's not just about it's not just about social cohesion and how can you integrate these numbers, but it's clear that among quite a lot of the British public, there's just not the buy-in to have this number of asylum seekers and migrants coming over to the country.
Thanks to Nick, he says the problem of immigration will be exactly the same in 20 years as it is today. No politicians have the will or courage to do anything to resolve it. Lawyers and the judicial system run the country. They're happy with how life in this country is because it doesn't affect them. Britain as we knew it is finished. Life will become more difficult and at times more violent. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I will be. And that is just absolutely typical of so many messages that are coming into this building. If you want to make your voice heard, 0344 499 1000. Kate, while I have you, let me ask you about this story in regard to Keir Starmer, this possibility that it could be actually breaking international law. The front page of the Times today, Palestine vow breaks law, claim top lawyers. We've just spoken to Arlene Foster about it, Baroness Foster, former First Minister of Northern Ireland, who is one of the signatories. Tell us what you think about this. Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, of course, big fan of the Palestinian cause. Will he listen to them?
I mean, this is kind of a story almost steeped in irony. So Keir Starmer, our great human rights lawyer and Prime Minister, supported by, you point out, our Attorney General, Lord Hermer, another vehement fan of international human rights law, often to their criticism. Well, here Keir Starmer's been told by other lawyers, your pledge to recognise an independent state of Palestine in September could actually fall foul of international law. So it's kind of maybe the most damning things you could tell Keir Starmer as a former lawyer himself. I mean, I think this starts to puncture the kind of problem around Keir Starmer's position. So he said Britain will recognise Palestine as an independent state unless Israel sign up to various things in the coming months, so a ceasefire, a peace process. Very unlikely that's going to happen. There's no incentive for Hamas to sign up to that, so we're expecting Britain to join France in recognising Palestine as an independent state. But the question that these lawyers are quite rightly raising is, what does that mean? We don't know even the territorial borders of the state, which is disputed. You know, who runs the state? So the West Bank of Palestine is run by something called the Palestinian Authority, run by an organisation called Fatah. But Gaza, which has been what all the stories have been around lately, and those images of famine and things, that's run by Hamas. So, you know, we don't even have a single government, a single territory, any agreement of what a state looks and feels like. And that's the problem with this state recognition, is it feels like empty gesture politics.
Just a quick word before you go on nurses threatening industrial action. This is after rejecting a pay increase. We know the junior doctors have been on strike for 5 days over last weekend. Where are we with this, Kate?
Yeah, I mean, look, your listeners will be used to this now. More medics going on strike. We've had the junior doctors out on strike. Now the nurses are threatening to go on strike. They've rejected, or they're balloting for a strike over a rejection of a 3.6% pay deal. Look, Wes Streeting and the government have been quite clear. They have chucked money at the NHS. We've all been clobbered with higher taxes to pay for it, but the money is running out now. There's no money for these big new pay demands that are emerging. The danger is that one trade union after the other in the NHS follow each other and start leading their medics out on strike, and that would leave waiting lists in a terrible place, all of ours needing to get doctor's appointments in a terrible place, and it would be a real hammer blow to the government, who've basically staked their entire political credibility on turning the NHS around.
Kate, thank you. That's Kate Ferguson there, who's the political editor at The Sun on Sunday. What do you think about what she said there about these stories and the fact that the government is under pressure on a number of fronts? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. Thank you to Leslie, who says, I hope we don't forget who invited the IRA into Parliament days after they bombed the hotel where Lord Tebbit's wife was badly injured. The same man, Starmer, wanted to be Prime Minister, says Leslie. Correct. Jeremy Corbyn, who became an MP in 1983, the year before the Brighton bomb. What are royals doing about homeless veterans, says Peter. Peter asking me, that's Paul. We will talk about that later in the programme, certainly in regard to how veterans are being treated in this country. Jane says, does this mean Macron and Carney would be breaking the law too? Well, we have heard from Arlene Foster that apparently in France there are legal issues around this as well, and there are lawyers who are talking about that because the Montevideo Treaty is of course not just in regard to the UK. Dave in Walthamstow says, great show Cardi P, as the Conservatives, Labour and France will not stop allowing the massive influx of illegal immigration into the UK, then surely they're complicit in their actions in being part of the actual gangs that Starmer is supposed to be smashing. Well, we're going to talk in just a few minutes time to the Shadow Home Office Minister Matt Vickers. We'll talk to him about all these issues that Kate has so ably outlined for us, and also Yvette Cooper being accused of siding with the Manchester Airport attacker who has been found guilty of assault. We still don't know whether there'll be a retrial of his brother. We will find out that fairly soon, probably in the next day or two, maybe even by the end of the week. And prisons are to get a Minority Report AI profiling system to avert violence. We've got a new guest coming up on that, Mark Hammersley, a retired prison governor. I want your thoughts as well on all of these issues. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much for your company. This is Talk Drive. It's just gone 5 o'clock and there's an awful lot to talk about this Thursday evening, including the migrant hotels and the fact that in Waterlooville in Hampshire there is a proposal to house migrants in £250,000 hotels. We'll be talking about that and taking your calls on all of that. Matt Vickers will be with us in a second, the Shadow Immigration Minister. He's just back actually from Norman Tebbit's funeral. We'll be talking to him about that and these major issues in regard to the migrant channel crossings hitting 25,000 this year. Also the Palestine pledge, the recognising a Palestinian state, that could actually break international law, according to top lawyers who are members of the House of Lords. We heard from Baroness Foster on that earlier on today. We'll be taking your calls, taking your tweets, etc., and your messages. Let us know your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please, or a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. That's what Trevor and Andrew have done. I'm going to be talking to them in just a second, so stay with us here on Talk. Well, thanks for your company. Matt Vickers is in makeup, but he's going to be with us very, very shortly. In the meantime, let's speak to Trevor and Andrew. Firstly, Andrew in Halifax. Andrew, you've seen and heard about that protest in Waterlooville. We heard from George Madwick, the Reform UK councillor, earlier on today. What do you make of it?
I'm delighted it's taking place, Peter. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And if I thought that similar protests were taking place here in West Yorkshire, or should I say here specifically in Calderdale, I would be joining them because, like most of the rest of the country, that I'm sick and tired of it.
I think a lot of people are sick and tired of it, and this, of course, is the plan to lower the numbers in hotels and disperse migrants across UK towns and cities. This is a new policy by the government. It's been branded a disgrace by locals in Hampshire after it emerged talks had taken place without consultation with the local council. People are attempting to be hoodwinked here. People aren't stupid. They've come out in protest here, haven't they?
Well, they have, and I need to say something on a personal note here, that like yourself and like everybody else, I hold my friends and loved ones in very, very high esteem. And I need to say this on radio, that if anything happened to a loved one of mine or a dear friend, something bad happened to them, not only would I hold the perpetrator responsible, but I would hold every single person from the Prime Minister downwards equally culpable for the injury or God forbid, death sustained by a loved one of mine at the hands of one of these monsters.
And I think a lot of people feel the same way, Andrew. I think a lot of people, that anger is absolutely palpable. We'll talk to Matt Vickers about it in just a second, the Shadow Home Office Minister. Let's have a quick word with Trevor in London, who's given me a ring. Trevor, what are your thoughts on this issue?
Well, what I don't understand is that these Labour MPs, do they not have an ounce of common sense? Do they not see what's going on in the country? That they have been elected by the people on a promise to reduce migration. They haven't done it. Now, the fact of the matter is that the people are now, the voices are becoming more and more, but they sit back and not once have I ever heard a senior MP from Labour come out and say that they have had enough, that their people are speaking up and their voices are now being heard. Now, what I would say, are they walking around with blinkers that they don't want to see it, or the fact that they're just ignorant to the fact is of what's going on? But what I would say to them is, in 4 years' time, you're going to have a redundancy of your job. People they're going to speak up like they did in America, where they've had enough, where wages were being reduced. The fact is that the illegal immigration was taking over the country. Hence why the reason why Trump got back in. He made a promise and he's living up to that.
And it is up to those politicians to live up to those promises that have been made time and time again. I'm going to talk to the Shadow Home Office Minister about that in just 30 seconds, Trevor. But can I ask you just before you go, are you a Tyrone man by any chance?
I am a Tyrone man, and I'm also an ex-veteran.
Good man.
What I'm saying as well is that veterans are struggling, and these government officials are doing nothing to help the British people, and they are an absolute disgrace.
Well, stay tuned, because I'm going to bring up the veterans point as well. We're in Tyrone. My mother's from 6 Mile Cross.
Oma.
just up the road. Trevor, thank you very much indeed. Great to talk to you. And now we have Matt Vickers in the studio. You've had your slap as we put on the face.
It was worth the wait. Look at me. I like $1,000.
Of course, you're HD ready, Matt. Matt Vickers is, of course, the Shadow Immigration, Crime Policing and Fire Minister, Conservative MP for Stockton West. We've just heard quite a lot of frustration there from Trevor and indeed our other caller who we had on a second ago who was chatting to us. Sorry, I just forget his name. I do apologise. Andrew, of course, in Halifax. Apologies. And there's a real frustration about migration in this country. We now have the numbers, the shocking numbers, that 25,000 people, I should say, this year have come despite Labour's crackdown promise. They would say it's a legacy of your government. What would you say to them?
Well, I would say, do you know what? Before the election, things were definitely not going well on immigration, but we were making progress. We had a deterrent in place. The number of people who were in hotels was going down. The number of people who were being removed, who had arrived illegally, was going up. We were making progress, but actually since that election, the problem is because it's bad. People think, oh well, it's bad and it's continued to be bad. No, it is so much worse. Since the general election, the number of people that arriving in this country has gone up, not a bit. It's gone up by 51%. It's off the charts. The number of people in hotels hasn't continued to go down. It's gone up. 28% more people in hotels across the country, and the number of people who are arriving illegally and being removed has actually gone down. All of the lights are flashing red on that dashboard. It's an utter disaster. But why is that? Well, he's going to smash the gangs. All he's doing is smashing records. The reality is he's put out the red carpet. He's told, he has changed the law. The government's changed the law to say if you arrive here illegally, you can become a British citizen. That was written into legislation.
But Matt, you can criticise the Labour record in the last year. You had 14 years. You were told in 2010, you were told in 2015, 2016 in the Brexit referendum, 2017 in the election, 2019 in the election. You were told time and time again, sort immigration. The Conservatives just didn't sort it, did they?
Well, I don't know that I was told, but the governments were told.
Yes,
but actually, when you look at it, Kemi, new leader, wasn't the leader. I wasn't a minister in the last government. It is entirely unacceptable, the situation that we were in before the election.
Many of the current cabinet, including James Cleverly, who's just gone back into the shadow cabinet, was the Home Secretary. They failed to get a grip here.
It was entirely unacceptable where we were. It is even more unacceptable that numbers are up 51%.
But are you in a position to criticise? Are you in a position to criticise here?
The reality is that these people who arrive illegally need to be removed. There was a deterrent put in place. It was in legislation that if you arrived in this country illegally, you would be detained and removed. We saw the ramblings. We saw people. I mean, the reality with Keir Starmer is that this is a guy who voted against every single measure brought forward to toughen up our immigration system. He then he actively campaigned against the deportation of foreign criminals. Are we really surprised that he's in charge of the country and things have gone from bad to much, much, much worse? Numbers aren't up a little bit. They're smashing records. 51% increase.
Speaking of smashing records, there were probably a record number of people on the streets of Waterlooville in Hampshire last night. This is thousands of people packing streets in protest after the Home Office secretly plotted to move asylum seekers into £250,000 flats. What we're seeing from the Labour government at the moment is that they want to get people, they're saying they want people out of hotels by 2029, but the alternative to that is putting them often into houses of multiple occupancy, social housing in other ways as well. When you see those people on the streets in Waterlooville, when you see people who aren't listening to the Labour government, they're not listening to you either, they're not even listening perhaps to Reform UK or other parties as well, they feel the political process hasn't and isn't working for them. They're out on the streets because they've nowhere else to go. What do you see when you see that?
I utterly share the frustration. These people, they're frustrated, they're fearful of what's happening to their community.
Isn't that a failure of the political process, Matt?
Well, it is, yeah. It is an utter failure that we've got immigration at the levels we have. Utter failure. The reality is those people are right to protest because the impact on their communities is horrendous. I went to Altrincham, which is now a bit historic actually, but hotel rooms, 300 hotel rooms taken out of circulation. The first thing you think is, what about all these lone men hanging around town centres? What does that say to people who want to go to the town centre? Then you see some of the horrific incidents that have taken place that will now be going through the courts about what some of these people have done. But actually the economic impact, that hotel went out of business. I met other businesses in the high street who were reliant upon the visitors who stayed in that hotel. The shops, the pubs, the restaurants, all being pushed. People who've worked hard to set up businesses pushed out by this. So those people are right to be out there protesting. The problem is the fringes who turn up and commit illegal acts as part of it. Often they're not even the local people. Often it's people who are busting from elsewhere who come in for a good riot and a good punch-up and to create utter havoc.
But of course that didn't happen last night. There was totally peaceful.
We've got to back the police in being tough on those things, but actually we've got to legitimately allow people to go out and protest against this situation. It is entirely unacceptable.
But is Westminster listening to them? Is Westminster actually listening and getting it and understanding that this needs to be sorted out?
There are a good number of people in Westminster who get it, but clearly not the majority. We saw in Parliament, we had a vote on the nationality and border security bill that Labour brought forward. As part of that, we put forward an amendment that said if you come to this country and you commit a crime, you should go. At the moment, you've got to commit a crime and get a penalty. Well, you've got to be put away for 12 months in order to be deported. No, if you come here, if you break into the country, that is illegal. You should be removed. If you commit any sort of crime, you should be removed. And then we see the big frustration around the Human Rights Act and all of the saga, chicken nugget gate, the guy who couldn't be shipped out because he didn't think he'd be able to shave at home, thought he'd face hostility back home. We've got these bizarre judgments. That is not what lawmakers want. That is judges taking some sort of artistic licence to do what they want. We had a vote in there to disapply the Human Rights Act from all deportation and immigration cases. And there were MPs in there who went through the other law, who voted against that. They didn't think that Parliament should be in charge of deciding who doesn't get to stay when it comes to.
But you're not in favour of withdrawing from the entire European Convention.
Well, we've got a piece of work going on that. Kemi's commissioned has put together.
Well, it's a year on. You still haven't made up your mind.
It's going to happen probably in September time. You're going to find it. But it's not about just saying it's all well and good. I can sit here and tweet anything. You can tweet anything. We can say whatever we want on the television. You actually have to have a plan about how you would do it and what all of the consequences are. We're going to bring it forward in a proper, measured way. Not just a reaction of saying it, but the reality is all of these cases are cases, by and large, chicken nugget get all caught up in the domestic courts. Disapplying the Human Rights Act sorts that. You don't even have to get into the ECHR debate. Do it tomorrow. It could have been voted on. It could be happening now. Those people could be getting deported.
You talked about support for the police there earlier. Robert Jenrick, your colleague, the Shadow Justice Secretary, has asked which side Labour is on in regard to the Manchester airport thug who attacked female police officers. He's been found guilty. We'll be careful, of course, because we don't want to prejudice a possible retrial of his brother. But Robert Jenrick has said the police need to know we've got their backs when they tackle violent offenders. Is that a reasonable criticism of Yvette Cooper? Why do you think she hasn't got the police's back?
I think it is a reasonable criticism. The problem for the police is they go in, they put their lives on the line to stand up for law and order in this country, and all too often the media's got it in for them, social media's got it in for them. Oh, the police did this wrong and the police did that. Everybody whips out a phone and tackles these guys and picks them apart. And the Home Secretary should have had their back. The first reaction should be, the assumption would be that the police are doing what they're trained to do. When they do what they're trained to do, then we should be on their side. When they're reasonable and proportionate in what they're doing. But the reality is, they're not on the side of law and order. Labour have taken off. We saw the workforce figures come out the other day. There are 1,316 less police on the streets now than there was when the election came. There is less funding available to police to do their job, to have the kit that they need to protect themselves and to protect the public. Horrendous situation.
I mean, Yvette Cooper says that she has always offered strong support to police officers who face appalling situations every day. In an interview earlier this month, she told our colleagues at Times Radio, "I've always and continuously offered strong support to police officers who face appalling situations every day of the week. I've spoken with Greater Manchester Police about this incident to ensure the officers get the support they need because it's important that they do so." I mean, what's wrong with that? Why is she not supporting the police in
the instant reaction was to question. The instant reaction of several Labour politicians was to question this police officer and their integrity over what had gone on through snapshots on social. It shows you a bit of the horrors of social media as well, in that other people joined that bandwagon because they saw a snippet, a small clip that didn't show you the context of a lady police officer having her nose broken, being battered and assaulted by these thugs. The reality is Labour are not on the side of law and order. They're not on the side of the police. They're putting less police on the streets. They're giving them less funding and resource, and they're letting criminals out of prison early.
Sir Gavin Williamson, your colleague, it's just been announced by Restore Britain that Sir Gavin Williamson, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, of course, former Defence Secretary, is joining the advisory board of Restore Britain to work with Rupert Lowe in Parliament. It's not a defection as such, but is this just a sign that grandees like Sir Gavin have actually got other things to do other than worry about Kemi Badenoch being Prime Minister, which isn't going to happen?
Gavin is a Conservative and will remain a Conservative for a very long time, a very committed Conservative who's having his part.
He's not that committed if he's working for Restore Britain. Well,
we engage in conversations with all sorts of people.
He's on the advisory board.
I engage in conversations with Labour politicians about what should be happening next and what shouldn't be. The reality
you're
is
not on their
Gavin's
advisory
committed.
board, though, or maybe you are. Maybe you'd like to tell me you're on Labour's advisory board.
Gavin is committed to getting a Conservative government back in this country so we can get those police on the streets and sort out the issues with tax. We all engage with party politicians.
He's on their advisory board. Well, I don't think it's a ringing endorsement of Kemi Badenoch. We'll agree to disagree on that. I wonder if we could talk about two more things before you go. One is this story on the front of the Times today about this vow on recognising a Palestinian state, possibly breaking international law. What do you make of these peers, lawyers, most of them, who have put this forward?
Well, I think the idea of recognising Palestine actually is just political posturing. It's flag waving. The reality is, the horrific scenes that we see in Gaza are not going to be, that humanitarian crisis is not going to be solved by recognising Palestine as a state. It's not going to bring those hostages back home who are still being held.
Isn't it a way Keir Starmer would argue to put pressure on Israel because of the humanitarian crisis?
No, it's not going to solve the humanitarian crisis. It's not going to get more aid into Gaza. It's not going to bring the hostages back. It's just political posturing, him waving flags to his backbenchers, submitting to some political movement. The reality is that it won't change anything. In fact, when you look at Gaza and you look at the situation of a terrorist organisation, the answer to this problem is the removal of Hamas. There is no future peace.
Well, that's what Keir Starmer says he wants. He says he doesn't want them to be.
This is not going to help that in any way, shape or form. Recognising,
Is there a time when a Palestinian state could be recognised?
We want to see a two-state solution. We want to see peace in the Middle East. We want to see those hostages returned. We want to see Hamas removed from Gaza. We want to see the Gazan people not suffering in the way that we're seeing on television screens and newspapers across the country at the moment.
Let me ask you about Lord Tebbit, Norman Tebbit. His funeral was this afternoon. I think you were there. Is that correct? Yeah. So that is obviously. He was a towering figure in Conservative politics. Many people think if his wife had not been so severely injured by IRA terrorists in the Brighton bomb in 1984, that he might have been a successor to Margaret Thatcher. But of course, rightly, she was his priority. I wonder what your reflections on him having attended the funeral today are.
I think he was a titan of his time, an incredible guy who played a huge part, not only in a political party, but actually in the country. And all of the things that we talk about Margaret Thatcher having delivered, he had a central role. Behind every great man there's a great woman, vice versa. Well, I'm sure that he did have a huge role in delivering everything that Margaret Thatcher brought to the country.
Party chairman, employment secretary. Yeah.
Incredible guy, and actually spoke a lot of common sense in his time, was outspoken, the sort of common sense that we'd like to see spoken more in Parliament.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Matt Vickers there, Shadow Home Office Minister and Conservative MP for Stockton West. Thanks for joining us in the studio this Thursday afternoon. What is your reaction to what Matt said? Are you persuaded by what he says, or do you think there's more to argue against? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We'll take your reaction, and we will also talk about this prisons issue, about AI profiling prisoners to avert violence. A new guest is going to join us, Mark Hammersley. He's a retired prison governor. We'll talk to him in just a second here on Talk. Stay with us.
And if this trial, the retrial, goes on for another year, there is a chance that those two officers will have what is commonly known as Damocles' sword hanging over their lives and careers for 2 to 3 years. Now, police officers must behave themselves, and the public expect a certain type of behaviour which is exemplary. Now, there's every chance that that's exactly what will happen. But those officers, every day they go out, and bearing in mind they're armed officers, will have that worry over their head.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everyone who has been in touch, including Alison and Billericay. He says, Rupert is an independent, Peter. Why shouldn't a Conservative be in a movement with him? Well, I think it's worth asking the question there, certainly, of Matt Vickers, but that's a fair point. Rob says, I find it laughable that Tories are saying immigration is worse under Labour and the hotels crisis. It was the Tories that put migrants into hotels first because of optics of conditions at detention centres. They never deported any migrants and no one believes them. Sean in County Durham says, Peter, I'm going to put you in your place when I speak to you soon, says Sean. Sean is on our call list, and Sean in Durham, I will happily have a chat with you before too long, let me tell you. Sue in West Sussex says, I have a daughter and 2 young granddaughters. Of course, I now fear for their futures, along with millions of others who are witnessing the destruction of our beloved country. And I can find no words, Peter. It breaks my heart. Peter, you're like a broken record, and stop blaming Labour for everything. You lot were in power for 14 years. We have been in power for 1 year. You're a Tory twit. It was the Tories that put them in hotels. I'm not a Tory, well, I may well be a twit, but I'm certainly not a Tory. I haven't been a member of the Conservative Party for some time. I was a special advisor, that is true, for 3.5 years up until 2020. I'm not a member of the Conservative Party anymore. I'm not an apologist for the Conservative Party or for Israel or for anybody else. I'm an independent thinker now, but certainly if you want to challenge me, if you want to have a chat, that's absolutely fine. 0344 499 1000. I want to talk now about prison officers who are going to use AI technology to identify potentially violent inmates before they launch attacks. It is a major expansion of artificial intelligence in the criminal justice system. The Justice Secretary, Shabnam Mahmood, on Thursday, today, is announcing plans to give the prison service the use of artificial intelligence software. Well, one person who's worked in quite a number of prisons in our country is the former Governor, Mark Hammersley. He joins us now for the first time. Mark, you're very welcome to Talk. How are you this afternoon?
Yes, very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
What do you make of this plan? Will it be helpful to prison officers?
Well, I guess anything that's going to help detect violence is going to be of some help. But I wonder how much help it will really be. I think in prison, violence has reached record levels, and it's getting worse all the time now. And in my opinion, in my experience of what I've seen over the years, it's the deterrent that isn't there for prisoners. If they do use violence against other prisoners, there is very little deterrent to stop them do it. There's a big code in prison that everyone will be aware of, that you don't grasp other prisoners. So that witnesses are very unlikely from other prisoners to incidents happen in prison. And technology in prisons is patchy and very different in terms of recording bits and pieces, CCTV and body-worn video cameras, some good, some bad. But any incident that does happen in prison is exactly the same as an incident happens on the street. It has to be proved in a court of law to exactly the same level as any other crime. And many cases of violence in prison is currently not proceeded with because all the policies of the last few years and currently is there's too many prisoners in prison, and all the policies have come out have been to let prisoners out earlier, not to keep them in later. And so
the bias is towards getting them out. This AI violence predictor is going to analyse factors such as a prisoner's age and previous involvement in violent incidents while in custody. It's designed to help prison officers assess threat levels on wings, enabling them to intervene or remove prisoners before violence escalates or before it breaks out at all. It's going to inform decisions and put prisoners under tighter supervision. I mean, can artificial intelligence be any match for the experience of officers? Because for such a long time, as you know far better than I do, Mark, Mark, there were lots of very experienced people who were allowed to leave the prison service and many younger, less experienced officers brought in.
Yeah, for sure. There's already a lot of intelligence that we've got that predicts. We know prisoners when they come in. We know what their previous behaviour is, their previous criminal records are. We know their behaviours. We do share some police information about how they've got on with their current crimes and their current gang issues and stuff. The artificial intelligence, I think, will enable that information to be assessed quicker. I don't think it's extra information, it's just assessing it, I think, probably a little bit more quicker, maybe a bit more accurately, maybe take out the human error point of view, so there could be a speed element to it. But when you, just because you predict someone's going to do something, it doesn't give you the authority to stop letting them do it. You don't, with the police, if they use artificial intelligence to predict when the next burglary is going to take place, it doesn't enable them to put that burglar in prison before he commits a burglary.
Yes.
He can watch the burglar perhaps more than other people and catch him in the act, but he's still got to catch him in the act. And it's the same in prison with artificial intelligence. Although we might predict which prisoners are more likely to use violence against others, I believe it will still be the fact that they have to actually commit violence before you can use that against them, not just the prediction that they might, because anything might happen. And prison's a very emotive place, and emotions do run high, and people react quite extremely to small bits of news sometimes.
Of course.
So it's quite a changing place, changing environment.
Mark, thank you for your analysis there. That's Mark Hammersley, who's a retired prison governor. Thanks for joining us on Talk Drive. Thanks also to Terry and Sly, says, great show as usual. What is the point of us having a navy if they can't stop a bunch of inflatable dinghies invading our country? I was under the impression that they were there to defend our country, says Terry and Sly. Pat says, I see the Labour Party as the enemy of the true British people. They're betraying our forefathers and we senior citizens who built Britain after the Second World War, and our children who are trying to carry on from us. The Labour Party are not fit to rule. It is greatly possible my father would say treason, says Patricia. Dawn in Chelmsford says, before the last election, Labour reassured businesses and farmers that they would be looked after. The NHS would be transformed and strikes would be investigated, says Dawn. Weird to think that hasn't happened. Another person says, I think Starmer and Mastermind Lammy, honestly, sometime after this show, maybe over the weekend or something like that, in the afternoon on Saturday, give yourself a little treat. Just make yourself a cup of tea, have a biscuit, and watch David Lammy on Celebrity Mastermind. It is a treat. Dawn says, I think Starmer and Mastermind Lammy are deluded if they think they can influence any solution in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Only the USA has any influence. Vint says, you would have thought the government would have looked at international law before incompetent Lammy and lying Starmer made their speeches on Palestine. It just shows total incompetence and ignorance by them. If you worked for a company, you would be forced to resign or be sacked. Michael says, afternoon, Peter and Kate Ferguson as well, is talking about her. How come my nan and granddad come from both sides of Ireland and love this country and we're proud? And Peter in Croydon says, it seems like Jonathan Reynolds has forgotten he was a trainee solicitor. He keeps digging a hole for himself. In fairness, Peter, he did correct the record in Parliament after lots and lots and lots of people exposed him as being a liar and having lied to Parliament, and that is factually what happened. Some interesting information. If you may have been paid today, I was paid today, which is great. There'll be plenty of Diet Cokes tonight, I can tell you. There are lots of people, though, who just do not have disposable income, who get to the end of the month, all their bills come out on the first of the month. I call the first of the month Cashmageddon, which is when all my bills come out of my account. Don't know what it's like with you, but according to new analysis, the true cost of debt for British workers, the UK is seeing a stark shift in career decisions, financial pressure, forcing workers into roles they didn't choose and second jobs they didn't want, because there are very many problems with the fact that people just do not have any disposable income. Just stuff for the little treats, the cinema trips, going out for a meal, things like that. A lot of people just do not have that. Maybe you're one of them. Maybe you want to tell me your experiences. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk to Adrienne Mills, the consumer expert and former That's Life presenter, in just a second here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, new data is showing that millions of British workers are taking jobs they don't want just to stay out of debt and to have some form of disposable income. Loads of people do not have disposable income anymore. 35% of British workers considering career changes due to financial pressure, not because they want to move jobs, but because they're just not earning enough money. And lots of people juggling side gigs, part-time jobs, etc. 43% of UK workers report having no money left after covering essentials. 14% relying more heavily on credit. Adrienne Mills is a consumer expert. Adrienne, 43% of people have no money left after covering essentials. And the problem is that, okay, it's nice to have money to go out to the pub or to have a nice meal out or go to the cinema or treat your kids or whatever, but when you've covered the essentials, sometimes things happen. Your washing machine breaks down or you need a new front door for some reason. And these things cost money and people just don't have it, Adrienne.
And that's when the emergency slush fund of money comes in. But sadly, if you haven't got it, then you become part of the ever-spiralling debt mountain. And if you think that the average people in this country have got anything between £4,000 and £7,000 debt, and I do say that in the years gone by, when people used to pay for things in cash, you were aware of what you had in your wallet or your purse. Now it's all just tap and go. And then lo and behold, at the end of the month, you get your credit card and you think, I'll just pay off the interest. And it's the worst thing you could possibly do because it will just keep mounding and mounding year in, year out. And you'll end up thousands of pounds in debt and with absolutely no hope of ever getting out of it.
It's good to control money. It's good to know what's going in and what's going out. But if you just don't have enough in the first place, money management by itself is a good thing, but it's not going to necessarily save you money. I mean, there are loads of people, even people who have enough money. I'm in the lucky position that I have enough money in my life, but I still go to money saving expert. I never make a decision without Martin Lewis's input, whether it's getting a mobile phone or home insurance or whatever. I might not always be in that position, but I want to have good sort of saving and habits as time goes on. I mean, what would you say to people who are just in a position where there just isn't any money left?
You need to look at your debts. You need to consolidate your debts. You need to speak to, I always say, and I always advise, as you've just said there, somebody like money-saving expert Martin Lewis, but also the Citizens Advice Bureau, which people seem to have forgotten all about. They are there to help people to actually look at where you're spending your money, how you're saving your money, if you possibly can, and how you can actually stagger payments. And if you are in debt with a number of companies, do think about phoning them up. A lot of people will bury their head in the sand and go, I'm not going to speak to them, I'm going to avoid that letter. No, sometimes if you speak to these people, they will go, okay, let's see what we can do. Let's offset this debt over a couple of months. But the problem is, Peter, and I've said it time and time again, when I came down to London many, many years ago, you know, I had my education paid for, I had my accommodation paid for by my local council, and I was doing jobs when I left drama school that I didn't really want to do, but I was pursuing a career that I wanted in acting, presenting. Nowadays, I've got so many friends who have got teenagers and kids in their 20s and 30s who actually have never been able to pursue the job they want because the debt mountain is so great. And to sum it up, somebody just said to me yesterday that their rent for their one-bedroom flat here in London is £400 a week. That is ridiculous.
It is utterly ridiculous. And just some of these statistics that are coming out today, we're talking about mortgage arrears rising by 69% in 2024, risen by years of interest rate hikes, credit card usage surging, half of UK adults carrying some form of unsecured debt, 38% of workers cutting non-essential spending. There's just an awful lot of people really tightening their belts at the moment. The credit crunch, the cost of living crisis is far from over, Adrienne.
Oh, Peter, this is going to go on and on. As you well know, my wife and I own a restaurant, and we see it in the restaurant. People that used to come, say, twice a week will come perhaps once every fortnight. They'll have, you know, one glass of wine, not a bottle, or they may have one bottle, not two. They won't have a dessert. They won't. And you people have really, really squeezed their belts. But if you think about it, I used to go to the pub when I was a teenager, and you'd buy a round of drinks. And now this really shows how old I am. I think you could buy 4 or 5 pints of lager for under £1. Yeah. Now, a pint of lager in my my local is nearly £7. And I see lots of 20-year-olds standing there thinking, are they really going to buy a round of drinks for 6 of their mates? No way. The times have changed. And actually, you only have to look at the television to just see how desperate everything is. Everything is down. That's why the Lionesses winning the other day was about the only ray of hope we've had in months.
It's a very, very good point, Adrienne. Thank you. That's consumer expert Adrienne Mills talking about that. Maybe you're someone who has debt and you're worried about your finances. Are things getting any better? Are there any chinks of light for so many people who just don't have enough money? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Sean in Durham, as promised, is on the air now. He's giving us a ring on 0344 499 1000. Sean, tell me why I'm wrong.
Do you know what it is, mate? I am absolutely fuming with Tory TV, right? This is what it is, Tory TV, right? You're owned by the Sun newspaper. I'm going to put you down here, right? Labour have been in power for a year, mate, right?
Yep.
The Tories were in power for 14 years and ruined the country. They squandered millions, billions over COVID. Where did that money go to? The back pockets of the Tory TV, MPs, right?
Well, I don't think it did, Sean.
Yes, they did.
No,
yes,
I mean you can.
They squandered billions of pounds.
The money did not go into the back pockets of MPs.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Okay, well that can be you're entitled to your opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts, Sean.
At the end of the day, I'm going to give you facts, right? What have the Tories done in 14 years, mate? What are the Tories done?
I'm not here to defend the Conservatives. I was talking to Matt Vickers,
you keep ripping Labour apart, mate.
Well, they're in power. They're the government, Sean. They're the government. They've been in power for a year.
The Tories in 14 years, mate.
Okay, I've challenged Sean. If you'll just listen to me for a second, I've challenged Matt Vickers on a number of occasions. If you listen to that interview over nearly 20 minutes earlier on this hour, I talked about the Conservatives' record on things like asylum and immigration. Do you think the country has got better in the last year, Sean?
We've only been in power a year, Peter.
Okay, but has the country got better? It's not me. It's not me. I was a
Yes, you used to work for them, right?
For 3.5 years. That's right.
You probably got the sack.
I did get the sack. I was sacked by Dominic Cummings. That's correct. It's in my book, yeah.
Ah, well, there you go then, right?
Okay.
At the end of the day, the Tories are to blame for everything that's happening now within a year. Why are you condemning Labour? We've been in a year, mate.
Yeah, that's quite a... I mean, it's not 14 years, it is a year. At what point then, Sean, do you think it's fair to say that Labour have got things wrong? Because Labour have done quite a lot in a year. They've done a U-turn, for example, on winter fuel allowance.
The Tories never done U-turns in 14 years.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that for a second, Sean. I'm not saying that for a second.
You're absolutely pathetic. You're a typical Tory talk TV pundit for the Sun newspaper, and you make me physically sick.
Sean, do you think what has Keir Starmer done right in the last year?
Yes, we've done U-turns, but how many U-turns did the Tories do?
I'm not talking about that. I'm asking.
How many,
well, probably loads. Probably loads, Sean. Okay, I'm not.
We had a Prime Minister called Johnson that was thick as the world.
Well, let's.
He should have been in prison.
Okay, well, let's talk about Starmer. That's fine. You don't like the Conservatives. I think we've established that, Sean. You don't think they did anything good in 14 years. I think you've established that. I'm not here to defend them. I'm asking you specifically what you think Keir Starmer has done in the last year that we should be talking about, saying, well done, Keir.
Well, just the other day saying that Palestine, that what's happening in Gaza, right? You're saying that it wasn't, that it wasn't. You're sick, man. You want to listen, you want to tune into another TV, right? And look at what's happening in Gaza, mate.
Yeah, I've talked about this on a number of occasions. Sean, I've talked about this on a number of occasions.
Blown up, mate.
Okay, I've talked about
blown up.
Okay, I talked about this on a number of occasions, Sean, and I'm really concerned about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The question we're asking is whether it's actually legal to recognise a state there. That's what 40 members of the House of Lords have put forward. They've written a letter to the Attorney General. It's on the front page of the Times. Should we not be talking about that, Sean?
You're saying that Israel's doing nothing wrong.
No, I'm not saying that for a second, Sean. You haven't been listening to the programme in the last few...
You've been saying that it's... What's the word there? What's the word?
I don't know, but I haven't been saying that, Sean. I think you need to listen more carefully to the output before you criticise it. Sean, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there because we've got to talk about the sport in a second. Stay with us here on Talk.
Apparently we don't meet the criteria because the building's been taken over by another company. The criteria is changed even though it's the same tenants that are living in the building. So I don't understand why it's changed. No explanation of what the change is. So we're just left to ponder and stress about it.
Yeah, and the Housing Association that runs your joint is called Qualitas Housing.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Neil, who says, tell Sean his beloved Labour has totally obliterated Wales for decades. Like every Labour voter supporter, they are delusional, says Neil. Thank you to that. Thank you to Keva, I think is how you pronounce Keva, in the West Midlands. Loving the show. Your previous guest, Mark, the former prison governor, he's right. Just because AI can predict behaviour doesn't mean it can be acted upon. I mean, has no one ever watched the end of Minority Report? Everyone guilty of a pre-crime was pardoned. I actually haven't seen Minority Report. Maybe I should watch it. But now I'm not going to, because I am presenting this show for another hour and 13 minutes, and it is time for the
Sport Summary on Talk.
Well, it doesn't say it on my screen, but I'm fairly sure Uma Gareth, the TalkSport presenter, is here. So I'm fairly, that's who you are, isn't it? You're not Sam. No, you're not.
Do I look like Sam?
The rain has played havoc in the test match at the... Oh, there's no way out of that. There's no way out of that sentence. The rain has played havoc in the test match at the Oval today, but England have taken wickets. Bring us up to date on this.
Yeah, that's actually why Sam Ellard isn't here. He's watching for us. He's watching the test. First day of the last test between England and India. Unfortunately, though, the big star of the day has been the rain. We've had 2 rain delays at the Oval. Stopped play a couple of times. England didn't get off to the best of starts. There was a bit of concern.
They're without Ben Stokes, aren't they, as well?
Exactly. He got a shoulder injury, decided to sit this one out. However, things seem to have turned around after the rain delays, proving once again England and rain go together like this, because now they've taken 5 wickets, very much on top. Josh Tongue has just taken 2 wickets. They're about 132 for 5 when I came in, they were. So England looking strong. They're currently 2-1 up in the series, so if they win this one, it'll be a comfortable victory for them, of course. But yeah, we'll see how they get on. They're playing until around 7:30 today, actually, because of the rain. They can carry on a bit longer. But yeah, we'll see how many more they can get out for India, because it looks like they've got a bit of momentum now. So yeah, India are in trouble.
Tell us about the North London derby that wasn't in North London, but a little bit further east, Hong Kong.
Yeah, a little bit. It's tiny bit. Yeah, it was obviously a pre-season friendly between Arsenal and Tottenham. Chance for us to see how the teams might be shaping up, to see some new players in action. Victor Gyökeres for Arsenal had a few minutes, but unfortunately Arsenal not able to really make the most of that. It was Pape Matar Sarr for Spurs who got the goal. 1-0 victory for Tottenham. But yeah, kind of raising questions now for Mikel Arteta. Is this his last chance to really do something this season? I think everyone's expecting Arsenal to finally, come forward. Come into the season, they've got their number 9. We always talk about Arsenal not having a striker. They've got Gyökeres now. How good can he be for them? Can they finally win the Premier League? And more importantly, if they don't, is Mikel Arteta out of here? I think probably the answer would be yes for me. But yeah, it was nice to see a North London derby very far away.
Very far away. Back to London, let's talk about West Ham. Big news with their star player who's been cleared of spot fixing.
Yeah, Lucas Paquetá has been cleared of all of the charges against him. So he was basically charged with fixing some betting charges. So basically it was said that during a couple of matches a couple of years ago, he deliberately got a yellow card in 4 matches. The charges have all been cleared, so it's been said, yeah, you're fine. He's been cleared of those. He's very happy. We'll go back into playing with West Ham next season. He's going to face a couple of punishments because he's been found guilty of not providing enough evidence for some of these claims as they were trying to process them. But I think that's kind of a minor thing now for him, because, there was a time when we thought he might be banned for life from playing football for this. It's quite a serious issue, and a lot of players have faced punishment for it in the past. But yeah, good news for him. Good news for West Ham, because he's one of their big players, and I think they might be in trouble next season.
Interesting documentary out now about NFL legend Tom Brady, about owning Birmingham City Football Club. He says some interesting things, including about Wayne Rooney.
Yes, he's had a go at Wayne Rooney's work ethic at Birmingham. Of course, Wayne Rooney used to be the manager at Birmingham City. Didn't last very long, had a terrible spell there. But yeah, Tom Brady, of course, became a minority stakeholder in Birmingham back in 2023. It's one of those where, obviously Tom Brady was great in his sport, but then he came over, decided to kind of take over, a bit like the Wrexham model. We all know that one. Ryan Reynolds, of course, and Rob McElhenney coming over and doing great things for Wrexham. But it raises this question about celeb ownership and whether or not it actually helps the club. Birmingham haven't had the smoothest ride. They obviously also had new owners a couple of years ago. But yeah, he's now come from Wayne Rooney. Not sure how Wayne Rooney's going to feel about that. Obviously a great footballer in his time. Not a great manager, but yeah, Tom Brady's certainly causing waves, and the full documentary comes out tomorrow. So I think we could see some more tensions rise when that full thing comes out.
Do you think you'd be a good celebrity owner of a football club?
I'm so glad you think I'm a celebrity, but I think I'd be a great owner of a football club. I think I'd be like Karen Brady levels, just like no nonsense. Have you seen Ted Lasso?
I haven't seen Ted Lasso, but my friend's husband's in it.
Really?
Yeah, apparently he plays a journalist or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But watch Ted Lasso. The woman who kind of comes in and she owns the club there, that's how I think I would be.
You do it.
She's so cool.
Yeah,
just the coolest woman ever.
Tip for life: don't mess with Uma Gurov. I've learned that to my cost. Uma Gurov, talkSPORT presenter. Thank you very much indeed. Have a lovely weekend. We'll see you next week. That is Uma Gurov there. Thank you to everybody who's been in touch. David says, who on earth would use Williamson for anything? He was a useless lightweight MP and minister who got found out. Rupert can do far better than that idiot. Certainly Gavin Williamson would say that he denies all those allegations in regard to leaking about the Huawei controversy that was was quite a number of years ago now. Steve in Birmingham says, I'm a nurse, I'm single, I live alone, who I don't have any money after essentials have been paid out each month. Today you're sympathising with me, tomorrow you'll be criticising me if I consider striking for a higher wage. Living in the UK today is torturous. Politicians, media, no one can decide whose side they're on nowadays, even in the face of reality and facts. It is laughable, says Steve in Birmingham. Steve, that is a really, really thought-provoking and excellent text, and thank you very much indeed for it. I appreciate that. I'll criticise junior doctors. I don't think I'm going to criticise nurses for striking for more money necessarily. I think we should pay people properly in the NHS. My point is that we do pay junior doctors properly. I know that's not your beef, Steve, and I just want to say that I'm sure you're someone who really works hard, and I've had great NHS care on numerous occasions, and it's the nurses who often run the show, keep everything ticking over. So don't be disheartened, Steve. I hope things get better in your life as well. I hope that's not patronising thing to say. I hope that's okay, and thank you for your message, and I really appreciate it. Jack in Gravesend says, I have a lot of time for Matt Vickers. However, like his leader Kemi Baden knocked in on Mike's show the other morning, they beat the same drum and put it across the country very, very well. However, they're unfortunately for them dragging their heels to the back of the queue. Reform or shouting from the rooftops, all that this country is calling out for. It is a shame, says Jack in Gravesend. Well, certainly we talked to Matt Vickers about migration. That's something that Phil in Exeter has given me a ring about. Phil, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hi Peter. It's very sad your previous call, not the caller, but the nurse.
Yeah, the texter. Yeah, Steve. Yeah.
It's really really sad that the young people of our country are being absolutely decimated.
You're right, Phil. And Steve, like so many people, Steve's worked hard. He's gone through all that training. His money comes out of his account, and he just doesn't have anything left for just the little things. Just going to a restaurant, go to the cinema, the fun things that you can drink with your mates down the pub, that kind of thing. Everything is just so expensive these days for so many people, Phil.
Yeah, it's terrible. I was of the generation where you could actually go to. They used to have clubs for the nurses and the doctors, where they could have a social club. And back in the day, it's all gone. Yeah. It's all gone. I don't know what's happened. It's all DEI now, I suppose. But the point I was trying to make was the fact that every single politician, like a conveyor belt, not just your show, but lots of shows, none of them absolutely grasp the nettle. And the nettle is we have to stop this immigration. How are we going to do it? Anyone who comes into this country illegally does not ever become a citizen, and anyone who comes in this country goes into an MOD, former base or whatever else, and made up, and then hopefully Parliament in a few years will be able to put the judiciary in their place to stop all the NGOs and all these, I call them illicit judges, just granting favours of anyone who comes into our country. And I do strongly believe that our youth are suffering so badly, and because of this constant influx of people. 900 people yesterday. Yeah. That means 900 people in our country will be put down the list for housing. Yeah.
25,000 this year as well, Phil. I mean, the government is just not getting a grip on this.
Yeah, that's the problem. Until, not one politician has actually come out and said, right, let's say, right, you don't get in, you don't get citizenship, no matter you came in illegally. End of story. And then without these hotels and without the HMOs, which Serco are being paid absolute billions for, and every single HMO owner are serving notice on their existing tenants because they know they get 5 years guaranteed with no hassle. So guess what they're going to do? They're going to go for the money. And that's our big problem in this country at the moment. And until we solve that, I really hope reform can actually... every election now is so important. Every election has to be won strongly by reform.
Okay.
And anyone who votes for Labour or the Tories, well, it's just a wasted vote, like they used to say about us.
Phil, listen, thanks for that. I just want to get Peter in from Nottingham just before the news. Peter, thanks for waiting. What would you like to say about veterans' housing?
Well, it's similar to the last call. It's obvious why they're chucking veterans out, because it'll happen with social housing soon, because they're starting to up on repairs. because we're on a housing association, and the repairs. We've had a new boiler last week. We've not asked for one or nothing. It weren't a bad boiler, but they'll be paying more for migrants than they'll pay housing benefit for normal people or veterans. And veterans, it sounded, from what I heard last night.
Yeah, on Kevin's show. Yeah, well, it was a dreadful story, and we're talking more about that actually as time goes on. In fact, in the next hour, we're going to be talking about these veterans facing eviction from council housing. A dozen veterans fearing they'll be made homeless after being threatened with eviction. Former military and Navy personnel, they have post-traumatic stress disorder, have been told they've got to leave their one-bedroom flats in Bolton after the council decided to stop paying the landlord. We'll hear more about that in the next hour. Peter, thanks for your thoughts on that. Thanks to everybody else who's been in touch about Sean. Quite a lot of reaction here. Gary says, I would have lost it with Sean, as he thinks Labour can't do anything wrong. Starmer thinks we're all like Sean. I come from South Africa, and after 25 years, the Socialists still blame the past government. Jason from Romford says, Sean was a stunning advert for the Labour Party. No rational argument, no balance, no knowledge, and no clue. A tone-deaf, ranting ideologue. The words of Jason, and not me, I hasten to add. Lee says, great show as usual, and call of the day goes to Sean in Durham. Comedy gold. Another Sean in West Sussex says, well done, Peter, for handling your previous caller. He should try listening to you rather than just shouting at you. He made a complete fool of himself, says another Sean in West Sussex. And Kev in Gate said, not all people from the North East are as ignorant as your last caller from Durham. He's what's known in Geordie land as a doylem. D-O-Y-L-U-M, how to pronounce that? I don't know. Gary says, well done, Peter, in the call with Sean. Clearly he does not like the Tories, but has no idea what Labour have done that can be called good. And Sam says, Sean for Foreign Secretary, what a clown. There we are. Lots more to discuss, including that veteran's story. We'll also talk to Brendan O'Neill in a few minutes from Spike. You're going to want to hear this. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Lovely to be with you. I'm here today and tomorrow and indeed all of next week as Jeremy Kyle is off. Thank you so much for your company. Loads to discuss. We'll talk to Brendan O'Neill in a second about the migrant channel crossings hitting a record-breaking 25,000 this year so far, despite Labour's crackdown promise. We'll talk about a Palestinian state and whether recognising that from the UK's perspective could actually be a breach of international law. Also, prisons getting a Minority Report AI profiling to avert violence. Veterans facing eviction from council housing. This was a superb story journalistically and awful for the people involved. Kevin O'Sullivan did it last night. We'll talk more about that with the Head of Employment at We Serve. We will look into what's in the Sun tomorrow as well, and take your calls, texts and tweets and voice notes. Lots to discuss. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Plenty to talk about between now and 7 o'clock. Stay with us. Well, a bit earlier on I spoke to Graeme Stringer. He is a Labour MP, and it's an interesting one specifically in regard to the state of the Labour Party and where things are. This is what Graeme Stringer said a little bit earlier on in the programme.
Many of our supporters, particularly those who are Muslims, some other people who are genuinely concerned about the terrible humanitarian situation in Gaza, have put a lot of pressure on. They want to do something, and this is the wrong thing to do. But you list a number of policies, some of which I think should have been changed, some of which I think shouldn't have been changed. What it indicates to me is that there isn't deep thinking going on before policies are arrived at. If you have a thought-out position and you can argue the case, then you can be robust in the defence of it. It is much more difficult to be robust in the defence of something if you haven't bottomed all the arguments in favour of it. And that was certainly the case on the welfare reforms, the winter fuel allowance. The arguments put forward, in my opinion, were extremely weak and ill thought out.
It's not exactly a ringing endorsement of his party there from Graeme Stringer, who is, of course, a Labour MP. Let's get reaction from Brendan O'Neill, who's Chief Political Writer at Spike. Brendan, great to have you on the programme. What do you make of what Graeme Stringer told the show?
Very interesting, isn't it? As you say, far from a ringing endorsement of his own party or the leadership or what the government is doing, I think a lot of people will feel similarly about this government, that it rushes to judgment on certain issues. It's quite knee-jerk. It does things without thinking them through, without thinking whether they'll be good for the British people, what the consequences might be for Labour itself. This is a government that seems to be quite hand-to-mouth when it comes to policy making, and a government that really doesn't have much vision or much direction. I think that's the impression a lot of people have.
It's interesting in regard to the Palestinian issue, Brendan, because what we're being told in the Times today is that 40 peers, many of them top lawyers, are claiming that it could actually break international law. Now, many states, of course, have recognised the Palestinian state, but wouldn't it be very ironic for Keir Starmer, who's Mr. International Law? International law trumps everything. We can't ever ignore what the international courts say, despite the fact that David Cameron did it on Britain voting and there was zero consequence whatsoever. He is someone who talks about the primacy of international law, yet international law would appear, in this case, to contradict his policy.
Yeah, that would be very ironic for someone like Starmer, who worships at the altar of international law. He, as you say, he is Mr. Human Rights. You know, this recognition of the state of Palestine, the way Starmer has gone about it, I think this is one of the dumbest and most dangerous things a British Prime Minister has done for quite a long time. Because what he has essentially said is that if there isn't a ceasefire by September, then Britain will recognise the state of Palestine. So he's threatening Israel. He's threatening a supposed ally of ours with this threat, with this warning that he's going to recognise their enemy state, as they would understand it, if there isn't a ceasefire. Now, that completely incentivizes Hamas to carry on with its barbarism. That gives a green light to Hamas to carry on fighting against the IDF, to carry on planting its bombs, which it's doing, even though we don't get much coverage of that, to carry on trying to block aid that's going into Gaza and making the people there suffer even more, get even more hungry. Hamas will be incentivized to do all of that because it knows that if the war carries on right through to September, then it will get that precious gift of recognition of Palestine from Britain. So Starmer is playing an incredibly dangerous game. He has betrayed an ally in its hour of need, and he's emboldened this army of anti-Semites. I think it's an unforgivable action on his part.
Let's remind ourselves of what the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, said about the Palestinian issue a little bit earlier on.
Our requests that all hostages must be released and that Hamas can play no future role in the governance of Gaza or a Palestinian state are long-standing. Now, we don't negotiate with terrorists, and Hamas are terrorists, and that's why we don't get into a to and fro with them as to what we want them to do. That's absolute in terms of our requests. What we are seeking to do is use the moment of recognition of a Palestinian state in a way that allows us to genuinely try and move this conflict forward, end it not just in the short term, but for the long term as well. Of course, get aid into Gaza, which is absolutely key, but use this moment to try and genuinely say what we have witnessed is so appalling, so horrific, the suffering on both sides, that we have to try, surely, and move this on for good. And that requires a two-state solution. That is why recognition of a Palestinian state is so important.
What do you make of what the Business Secretary said there, Brendan?
I just think there is such staggering naivety in government circles on this conflict. You know, this is, as everyone acknowledges, this is a terrible, terrible conflict. There is huge suffering in Gaza, and it is awful to see it. There is hunger, there is desperation, civilians have died, as well as thousands upon thousands of Hamas militants. So when we hear that figure of 60,000 deaths, we do have to remember that a significant number of them are anti-Semitic.
And also that the 60,000 figure is from Hamas itself.
That's right. So we do have to think seriously about that. But there is undoubtedly a lot of suffering in Gaza. Everyone wants this war to end. But the question has to be, on what terms is it going to end? Is it going to end with Hamas still in existence? Is it going to end with a new Palestinian state that could potentially become a launch pad for more annihilationist violence against our ally, the Jewish nation? How is it going to end? And let's not forget that Hamas and also Palestinian Islamic Jihad, these are movements that don't only hate Israel, don't only hate Jews, they hate the West as well. These are violently anti-Western movements that have contempt for the little Satan of Israel and the great Satan of the United States and Europe. So we are being very naive when we say that Israel should just lay down its arms and call it a day. Israel has the right to pursue this army that invaded its territory on the 7th of October 2023. And I think it is in all our interests that we finish this war by finishing Hamas.
Okay, Brendan, thank you. Maybe we could talk a little bit about the protests in Waterlooville. We've had quite a number of photos coming and moving imagery coming into the building as well. The Home Office secretly plotting to move asylum seekers into £250,000 flats. I mean, I spoke to Matt Vickers about this earlier on. I'm not sure the Conservatives or indeed Labour actually get this and get the strength of feeling about this either, Brendan. What do you think?
Oh, they absolutely don't get the strength of feeling. There is such a passion among sections of the public about what Labour is currently doing in relation to illegal migrants, putting them up in hotels, now offering them these kind of luxury flats, you know, paying for their bed and board. Well, we're all paying for it, I guess, through our taxes. People are very, very angry about this. People, you know, the most basic question I hear from people all the time is how come we can give a hotel room and 3 meals a day to someone who just arrived here illegally, but we can't give them to our homeless or people in this country who are poor or elderly people who
and the veterans issue is one we're going to talk about in a few seconds. Actually, I'll ask you about that in just a second, Brendan. But first of all, I just want to remind ourselves of those scenes in Hampshire last night and what actually went on there.
Not consent to them, and we did not vote for them. This action to house illegals in Waterlooville is about as undemocratic as it gets. We demand the deportation of every illegal migrant.
People shouting "Send them home" there in Waterlooville, and Brendan, I think we've got your reaction certainly to that, but there have been, you know, thousands of people there as well, peaceful protests, of course, and a huge anger in regard to people being hoodwinked in all of this, and the fact that there is this pledge from the Labour government to get many people out of hotels between now and, in fact, they want to empty the hotels by 2029, but these people have got to go somewhere. They're not going to, well, they're going to many places, but some of them are homes that people on social housing from this country have paid into the system, or their families have paid into the system over the years, are not getting.
Exactly right. And you know, it used to be a perfectly reasonable request that if someone came here illegally, that they would be deported. I mean, that's how the immigration systems around the world worked for years and years, for decades and decades, in fact. And you know who's really ticked off about the illegal immigration crisis is legal migrants in this country. They're often the angriest, in fact, about this, because they came here legally, they've worked hard in this country, they've contributed to it, and they don't like the idea of people coming in illegally and giving immigration across the board a bad name. You know, my parents are immigrants. They moved. I'm a first-generation Briton. I'm the first generation of my family to live in this country, and I love living in this country. And the idea that people are coming here illegally and being put up in hotels and being given a, you know, relatively nice time while others in this country are suffering quite harshly economically, that's really worrying. And I think there is great anger across the country, and the Labour government is on a hiding to nothing if it doesn't recognise this anger or do something about it.
Where did your parents emigrate from?
From Ireland.
That was a joke, Brendan. You're called Brendan O'Neill. I kind of picked that up. I just wonder, just before you go, Brendan, what you think about this artificial intelligence profiling in prisons to avert violence.
I'm torn on this because something really does need to be done about the threat of inmate violence, especially against prison officers who do often a very hard job in thankless circumstances. But I do wonder what's happened to common sense. You know, what's happened to screws in prisons and prison bosses just using their nous and saying, well, this is a young guy, he's got a violent past, or this is a radical Islamist, so we should separate him off from other radical Islamists. I do think a bit more common sense about who poses a threat is probably the better way to go, because AI and machines can often make mistakes, and this is too serious an issue to let mistakes happen.
Brendan, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's Brendan O'Neill, who's the chief political writer at Spiked there. Thanks to Phil in Portsmouth, who's been in touch. Quite a lot of people getting in touch with Sean, who was on about half an hour ago, and certainly gave me the benefit of his insight and ideas as to why he didn't like my broadcasting. And Phil in Portsmouth says, well, at least I'm enjoying your show. 2 more people for your Christmas card list. Sean and Khaled. Khaled from Leicester, of course, is a frequent caller to the programme. Thank you, Phil in Portsmouth. Mick says, Sean proved why Starmer and Labour must go. Nadine says, beautifully handled, Cardi P, calm, respectful and allowing the caller to do it all alone. I do think sometimes, slightly my style, some people say, why don't you just go in for the kill with these government ministers and stuff? Well, I just sometimes just let people, you know, expose themselves a little bit, and I think that's what Sean perhaps did. Ian said, well done on keeping your composure and civility in the face of your recent callers' hostility and ignorance of logic and common sense, says Ian. And we've looked up what a doylem is. I'm not quite sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but someone, I think it was Kevin, who said that he's Kevin Gateshead, said that he believes that Sean is a doylem. And it's a slang term primarily used in the north of England, particularly in Yorkshire and the northeast, to describe a stupid or foolish person. I used a phrase yesterday, actually, my favourite phrase, one of my favourite Northern Irish phrases, of course, which is when something happens to someone and you think they deserve it, you say, slap it up you, which I'm a big fan of. Phil in Portsmouth says as well, with people like Sean who hate you and your programme, it begs the question, why are they watching in the first place, says Phil in Portsmouth. We may have had that discussion ourselves editorially. Listen, people who don't like the broadcasting, they're welcome too. That's okay. I mean, if you disagree with what I'm saying, that's fine, because we disagree without being disagreeable on our programmes. But if you genuinely don't like the station and think this is not for me, there are other stations available. Not that I would obviously encourage anybody else to turn over, but I mean, we provide a need. We're the home of common sense. We're the home of free speech. I love people ringing in and telling me I'm wrong, but I think veering over into the sort of, well, you know, slightly abusive, that's well, I don't know if that really helps in any way. I don't think that adds very much to the The mountain of human common sense, I suppose. Susan says, I listened to that guy earlier on having a hissy fit about the Tories. While I'm not a Tory or Labour, I have to agree that the media are focusing too much on what Labour is doing. Common sense tells me it's not possible to make constructive changes in just 1 year. The country is in such a mess, I don't think any party will be successful. The Tories are fully to blame for the mess, and Boris Johnson and his henchmen like Jacob Rees-Mogg, Nadine Dorries, etc. have been allowed to get away with it. Well, Susan, that's fair enough, but I suppose my question is, at what point do we start saying that Labour are responsible? I mean, there is the awesome power of the Prime Minister with a huge majority. He can do basically what he wants, or at least you would think he can, but is he actually doing that? So I suppose what I'd love to hear from you, Susan, and do message in again, and I'll get Ryan and Faith, the team behind the glass, to keep an eye out for any message you send in the next 42 minutes. I just wonder, what is the time? When, Susan, do you think it's fine to say, actually, now it's Labour's fault, now the state of the country is Labour's fault? Because it's been a year. Mike in Lincoln says, when I hear Tories like Matt Vickers spouting about the immigration and indeed boots crisis, my only thought is you had well over a decade to sort it. You have a huge majority under Bozo Johnson to legislate and make UK law primary above the ECHR, and indeed remove the troublesome elements from the Human Rights Act. But you didn't. You made it worse with the Bozo wave. Why on earth would we listen or indeed believe a single word they say, says Mike in Lincoln. Well, what do you think? 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk more about Kevin O'Sullivan's exclusive yesterday about veterans facing eviction from council homes. This is former military and navy personnel who have conditions including post-traumatic stress disorder, have been told they're going to leave their one-bedroom flats in Bolton because the council decided to stop paying the landlord. We'll hear more about this in just a second here on Talk.
Apparently we don't meet the criteria because the building's been taken over by another company. The criteria is changed even though it's the same tenants that are living in the building. So I don't understand why it's changed. No explanation of what the change is. So we're just left to ponder and stress about it.
Yeah, and the housing association that runs your joint is called Qualitas Housing.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
One more on Sean, and then no more on Sean, I promise you. But Robin Redbreast has been in touch. She says, that guy who phoned in this afternoon ranting and raving about Tory scum and getting abusive to Peter Cardwell was awful. Peter is so well-mannered and doesn't get flustered, but will need a cuddle after a shift. That's very kind of you to offer. I think I'm all right, but cuddles are always welcome if they come from the right place. We're now going to talk about veterans facing eviction from council housing. I'm sure lots of people saw this story on Kevin O'Sullivan's show last night. I'm sure he will be doing more on that tonight. And this is a dozen veterans fearing they'll be made homeless after they're threatened with eviction. Former military and navy personnel have conditions including post-traumatic stress disorder have been told they've got to leave their one-bedroom flats in Bolton after the council decided to stop paying the landlord. There are rumours the accommodation was being cleared to house asylum seekers. That has been denied by the organisation that owns the housing, Qualitas Housing. They say Qualitas Housing is aware of recent claims suggesting that Armed Forces veterans are being evicted from Constellation House to accommodate asylum seekers. These claims are entirely false. The difficult decision to issue Section 21 notices, that's essentially getting people out, Section 21 notices followed the local authorities' refusal to reinstate housing benefit for the tenants. We are actively supporting the tenants and appealing this decision and are working closely with both them and the council to ensure no individual is left without suitable accommodation. Well, let's speak to Dan Wilkinson, who is Head of Employment at We Served. Dan, what do you make of this?
Hi, Peter. It is typical of how veterans are treated in this country, I think. When people leave the military and having served their country and basically signed up to the possibility of putting your life on the line for their country, they are dropped by the MOD, by the government, and they are largely forgotten about. And if we treat our veterans like this, then how do you expect the government to reach their targets or to man their armies, navies and air force with the increased funding that they've promised over the last couple of weeks and months? It simply isn't good enough.
Well, it's a fair question, and actually what a lot of people will see is not the nuance and detail of this and all the different whys and wherefores of this story. What they will see is many people coming to this country who have contributed nothing, who are getting accommodation for free. We've had protests within the last 24 hours in Waterlooville in Hampshire about this. And then they will see these veterans who have literally put their lives on the line, who have seen things that are unimaginable to me, who has never served a day in uniform. They have risked their life for this country, and we can't even give them housing benefit. And that to me, I mean, it's just on a very, very basic level, this is just totally unfair.
And it's not restricted to Bolton, I promise you. This is countrywide that this sort of thing happens. And it's not about the immigrants, but it is about the fact that we cannot seem to look after our veterans and give them a fair crack at housing, a fair crack at employment, a fair crack at receiving the help they need if they have been struggling on the back of their service.
Why is that? Is it an attitude? Is it a system? Is it a contempt for people who have served this country? What is it? What lies behind all of that? Because you look at somewhere that like America that has the Veterans Administration. Look, there are many veterans there who are homeless. There are many who don't have correct housing and so on, but they actually have a dedicated service, and they venerate their veterans. Mostly, not everybody does, but an awful lot of people. You get all sorts of discounts if you're in uniform, if you've served. There are all sorts of ways in which, I mean, I've been in Texas, for example. People come in to eateries and things. They get served first. They get all sorts of discounts and things. That to me is the way we should treat our veterans.
I would love to see that, Peter, but I think we're a long way from that. In the United States, I do know that their budget for veterans is the same as our budget for the whole of our Ministry of Defence, something in the region of 56 billion, which is basically $1 billion per state, effectively. But it's still very tricky for them to access it in certain areas because it's state by state. In this country, it should be easier because we all come under one government broadly, and we should be able to look after our veterans better and reward them and thank them for their service, as you said. Now, I want to be really clear that a lot of veterans feel a little bit uncomfortable with being thanked for their service. But the fact that we are literally dropped, there is no benefit to me or to thousands of veterans having served their country after they leave.
There absolutely should be, Dan, and there's no question about that. Dan, thank you. That's Dan Wilkinson there, he's Head of Employment at We Serve. No doubt Kevin will be talking more about this in his show in about half an hour. Just when we go live to the White House now, Caroline Levitt is there. She is the White House press secretary, talking about Steve Witkoff is going to visit Gaza tomorrow. Steve Witkoff is the negotiator for Trump. Let's hear what Caroline Levitt is saying.
Levels of access to the European Union markets to export our American-made goods. Also, as part of this agreement, the EU will purchase $750 billion in U.S. energy to strengthen our energy dominance, reduce European reliance on adversarial sources, and narrow our trade deficit with the EU. The EU will also make new investments of $60 billion in the United States, in addition to the more than $100 billion the EU companies already invest in the U.S. every year. All of these massive purchases and investments will happen by the end of 2028. What we are watching is President Trump rebuilding the greatest economy in the history of the world and simultaneously proving the so-called economic experts wrong at every turn. Media pundits said a trade deal with the EU this monumental and beneficial to America would be impossible, but President Trump made it happen. The so-called economic experts repeatedly said that the American economy would be in a recession this summer. Well, summer is here, it's almost over, and that recession does not exist. Yesterday, in fact, real GDP growth in the second quarter increased at a 3.0% annual rate, significantly above expectations. President Trump's America First policies are driving economic growth.
Well, we're going to leave it there. Caroline Levitt, the press secretary, talking in the White House. If there's anything more significant is said, we just missed her when we went to her. We just missed her there, talking about the fact that Steve Witkoff, who is the envoy to the Middle East, he's going to be in Gaza tomorrow. I'm surprised they've announced that before it has happened, but we'll bring you more details of that in just a second. Also more details of what's coming up in your copy of The Sun tomorrow. The deputy head of news will be with us in a second. That is, of course, Will Barker. He will tell us all about what's in the paper. No doubt they'll be reflecting on that press conference as well. And we'll get your views as well between now and 7 o'clock. Keep them coming in. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thanks so much to everybody who has been in touch. We will take more of your calls between now and 7 o'clock. But first I want to speak to Will Barker, who's Deputy Head of News at The Sun. Will, good to see you. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. And you?
Yes, very well. Excellent. Thank you. Great to have you back in the studio. More than 25,000 migrants arriving across the Channel so far this year. You'll be reflecting all of that in The Sun tomorrow.
Yes, well, they've been trailing this figure. It's been approaching, and now we passed it today. The government confirmed 898 people came over yesterday. I mean, think about it, that's almost like a hotel of people are coming over every day. And came over 13 boats on Wednesday. So this is the quickest that the Home Office have reached, this country has reached this figure. It's 51% up from last year, 73% 100% higher than 2023, and it just keeps getting bigger, keeps getting more, and it's obvious we need to do something about this now.
Yeah, certainly. I'm sure you'll be reflecting on all the aspects of that in the paper tomorrow. I can honestly say the most intriguing story for me, we haven't really done it on this show so far because it's just a straight up and down news story and there's no real discussion around it, I suppose, but some of the detail that's coming out of this pensioner who's under arrest after 8 children were rushed to hospital amid fears they'd been poisoned at a summer camp. It's a fascinating story.
It really is, and I mean, it is a proper mystery at the moment. We can't quite work out. I think we need a little bit more information at the moment. But yeah, I mean, the police have announced that they've been at a press conference today. They arrested this guy away from the camp. Thankfully, all the children are fine. They were taken to hospital as a precaution. But I think this is going to unravel over the next couple of days to truly work out what's going on, because it's a very strange one to crack at the moment.
Yeah, 8 children taken to hospital as a precaution after a triage centre was set up in a nearby village hall. All of them have now been discharged. You had great coverage today of Ozzy Osbourne, and of course more tomorrow as well. Is someone who's very close to the hearts of Sun readers.
Yeah, so we had all the public stuff yesterday. This is a great sort of show of emotion, showering out with the roses and all that. And then today's the sort of opposite. It was a very private, quiet occasion at their house in Buckinghamshire. But Ellie Henman on Showbiz has managed to sort of find a few bits and bobs about what was going on. It was apparently a great service, full of tears and laughter. There's an array of sort of celebs there: Elton John, Marilyn Manson, Youngblood, and sort of quite strangely, he's been buried in his garden and sort of next to the lake there. They've dug a plot up, and I guess that so the family will always be close to him. Yeah. And but it's all been sort of kept well under wraps, public well away, and they held a great service by all accounts.
Also, one of the stories that I've really enjoyed looking at in the Sun tomorrow is about Britain's priciest fish and chips. It's £65. It weighs up to 2.2 kilograms, and no one has ever been able to finish it alone. No. Did you send a reporter to try?
Of course we
Yes,
did.
obviously, yes. What happened?
Well, this was my brief. I think I might have possibly sent the wrong one because he's a bit of a fitness freak. And
No. You want a porker like me.
Exactly. I would have been there.
You want someone who's very, very hungry all the time and loves fish and chips. Yeah.
I should have left him on the desk and gone myself. But basically it's down in Kent. They've come up with this idea. They found these sort of huge fillets, 2.something kilos of fish. They do it with 4 portions of chips. Cost £65, which is quite a lot of money.
Sure is.
And away you go. But nobody's managed to sort of make a dent on it at all.
It includes 4 portions of chips, 4 sides, 4 drinks, and bread and butter. Obviously, you need a few more carbs. Yeah. More than enough for a family of 4, but a bridge too far for any one person. Has anyone come even close
I don't know.
to eating
I don't
this?
know. I mean, you get given a bread knife to eat it with because it's so vast.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
That's quite impressive, actually. I mean, what's the largest amount of food you've had in one evening? Can you
probably? It's probably been a night with the Chinese where we've sort of got going, and you just can't stop really, and then regret it deeply afterwards.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I've sometimes got home, quite late at night, maybe being out at something or whatever, and felt a bit hungry, and made myself something. and thought, I've already had 3 meals today. This is not my 4th meal that I'm having. That's not. It
is a bit of a problem on the news desk because we do sometimes get things sent in to us, freebies from various fast food places.
Okay.
And you can end up just eating all day if you're not careful.
Yeah, you do need to be. It's that grazing. There was one news organisation I worked with, not in this building, I must say, and they had a treats table, and people used to always bring in loads of buns, and it was always stuff that's really bad for you, and you needed to be really, really careful. But the Codfather is the working headline for that, so I'll read all about that tomorrow in the Sun. Thank you very much indeed to Will, who's scuttling back to the news desk now, put the paper together. That's Will Barker, who's Deputy Head of News at the Sun. Lots coming up in the next few minutes. All your calls, texts and tweets and voice notes. Lots to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. Stay with us for that, and if you want to get your call in, 0344 499 1000.
apparently we don't meet the criteria because the building's been taken over by another company. The criteria is changed, even though it's the same tenants that are living in the building. So I don't understand why it's changed. No explanation of what the change is. So we're just left to ponder and stress about it.
Yeah, and the housing association that runs your joint is called Qualitas Housing.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is taking questions from the media on economic matters, on the foreign policy of the administration. She said earlier on that Steve Witkoff is going to go to Gaza tomorrow from the administration. Let's hear what she's saying.
Visitors' offices, those offices will be temporarily relocated while the East Wing is being modernized.
And then on Israel-Gaza, there are some reports that negotiations with Hamas might not be continuing. Did you get any updates from Steve Witkoff on that?
I did. Special Envoy Witkoff is actively talking with our counterparts in Israel about that, and he wants to give some grace to the president so he can fully brief the president on what he's learning on the ground in both Israel and Gaza. But the president put out a very strong statement on Truth Social this morning, which I'm sure you saw, and he said the quickest way to end this entire conflict, the humanitarian crisis that we've seen, and the crisis in Israel that of course started on October 7th when Hamas brutally kidnapped and raped innocent Israelis, that terrible terrorist attack, is for Hamas to surrender, to release all of the hostages, and to end this conflict. And that's what the president wants to see. He's made that very clear. But the special envoy will be in Gaza tomorrow, as I shared with you previously. Josh.
Can you give us a little more clarity on the tariff timing? You said that the reciprocals will take effect tomorrow.
Yes.
Does that include the new auto rates, for instance, on Japan, Korea, the EU? Is this all coming effective tomorrow?
So some of the countries you just mentioned, Japan, South Korea, they have bespoke trade deals that the president cut, which, just to backtrack for a second, Josh, we promised that the president would negotiate with countries all around the world to cut tailor-made trade deals depending on those countries' challenges, how badly they've ripped off the United States of America and our manufacturing industry and our workforce in the past. And he has done that. Of our 18 major trading partners, 2/3 of those trading partners have a deal. We've sent out 17 letters to countries around the world. And the rest of those countries that either do not have a deal or have a letter, they will be hearing from this administration by the midnight deadline tonight. So yes, tomorrow, August 1st, the reciprocal rates will be going into effect. If more deals are cut between now and midnight, I will never count out the president. You've seen him do it before. He cut 3 deals in one day very recently. So we'll see what happens. I do know foreign leaders are ringing his phone, realizing this deadline is a real thing for them tomorrow, and they're bringing offers to the table.
And we're reporting that the president plans to meet David Solomon of Goldman Sachs today. Can you say what they'll discuss?
Well, that's Caroline Leavitt there giving some clarity on Steve Witkoff, the envoy to the Middle East. He will be in Gaza tomorrow. Caroline Leavitt, of course, the White House Press Secretary. We're going to leave that just for the meantime. They're talking about internal American issues. Let's speak now about something that's really important here, and that's our story, Kevin O'Sullivan's story actually, yesterday night about those veterans who are being kicked out of their homes. Let's speak to Graeme in Welshpool, who has been reacting to that. Graeme, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Well, I'd just like to say, first of all, I am an 81-year-old blind veteran. I took an oath to serve my country and my Queen, and I did the best of my ability. But
well, thank you for doing so, Graeme.
I'm now living in a home which costs me £23,000 a year to stay in.
Goodness me.
I'm lucky enough to have money,
yeah.
But why is it these so-called immigrants, or whatever they cost, whatever they come, is costing us, I believe, around 9 million a day to keep them here. Yet someone like myself who've worked hard all their lives, I'm being ripped off by people, government are taking the money out of me that I've earned, and they're not giving me a thing. But these immigrants, they get in this, they get in that, they're seeing doctors, they're seeing dentists, they get first-class medical treatment. Yet people like myself and other veterans on the streets who will serve their country get absolutely FA.
It must really stick in the craw, Graeme, because there are lots of people who haven't given half to their country what you have, who haven't served in uniform, who haven't sworn an oath and put their lives in danger because of and served our country, who feel the same way as you. They don't perhaps feel as strongly as you, Graeme. What do you think should change? What do you think the government needs to do to redress the balance and to make sure that those who have contributed in the way that you've contributed, and other ways as well, can actually be looked after?
Well, start looking at homes for veterans. Don't take money off us that we've earned and worked hard for all our lives when you're giving these people a free home, free food, free this. I mean, start sending them back. And then start helping veterans. Start helping people who worked for their country, who fought for their country. I mean, I know a guy, he was 38 years of age, right? He was treated abominably by the services. He ended up taking his life. Yet he done 2 tours of Afghanistan. And he was treated like, well, I won't say what he's treated like. I'll just we'll say it on the radio. But it's just wrong. So wrong.
Tell where did you serve yourself, Graeme?
Well, I served in Germany during the Cuba crisis in 1962. I also served with NATO and Shape Headquarters.
Graeme, thanks for your call. Really appreciate it. Really interesting to hear what you have to say. Tad's been in touch. Says many years ago, he used to work on North Sea oil platforms in Denmark. Often we were prevented getting out to getting out because of bad weather. At such times we were holed up in a hotel ashore. The company would pay for our meals, but only allow one alcoholic drink with every meal. We had a secret arrangement with the hotel management. We would drink whatever we wanted and put it down as food. One day an auditor came around and looked at the bill. My goodness, he said, these blokes can't half eat. Regards, Tad. Let's talk to Barbara, who's in Newcastle and has some views on migration. Barbara's given me a ring, as you can too, between now and 7 on 0344 499 1000. Barbara, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Well, about Graeme and my husband, who was an army officer, died in 2011, and I can only say that the army have been absolutely brilliant with me, and
they've helped you.
My daughter, I get a pension every month. I couldn't do without it, and so I certainly feel sorry that he hasn't had the same treatment, but I really can't say anything but good about them.
Okay. You've given us a ring about migration, I think,
yes,
Barbara?
I mean, personally, my children are fed up with me shouting at the television at you. I've said for quite a long time, if the migrants don't, if they don't know that they're getting anything at all from us, and if they're told, I'd somehow get it to them that when they come, they will not get anything at all. They get no housing, they'll get nothing at all, and they'd be better off staying where they are.
Yeah, we've got to certainly have a deterrent and no incentives. Barbara, thanks for your thoughts there. Appreciate that, and good for you for speaking up for the army as well. Certainly Graeme had a very, very moving tale to tell, and Jason in the Lake District has been in touch to say it's tragic to listen to Graeme, to the hurt in his voice, utterly betrayed by our country. Thank you for that. Jane says during the pandemic they were able to move people off the street and help them, or was that just theatre? When the government wants to do something they will, so obviously illegal migrants come first. Jane, I actually know someone who was heavily involved with that particular scheme called Everybody In, or Everyone In, I should say, which was in regard to homeless people who were put in hotels during the pandemic to make sure that they were kept safe. And certainly the incentives to be out on the street, it's a complex issue. There are a lot of people who really feel as if they wanted to be out on the street, they wanted to beg. Their drug dealers were there as well. In some cases, people, of course, have drug addiction. It's a complex issue. In regard to veterans themselves, if they are homeless or part of the homeless population, they just need to be helped. There are some people who resist help. There are some people who don't want to be helped, but really, or perhaps abusing alcohol or drugs, and that can be very difficult to have any stability in their lives. We need to help those people. We need to make sure that people are housed, especially people who have given service to our country. Another Graeme has been in touch from Liverpool. Graeme, you're very welcome to the programme. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say, Graeme?
Hi, Peter. Thanks for taking my call. Basically what it is, I'm a service engineer. I go across the country, and I'm getting a feeling from people who look like me with overalls on, blue collar. They've had enough.
Yeah.
3 years ago, it used to be, well, if anything happens, A, B, and C. Now it's when it happens, they don't start getting involved. A lot of the older generation are saying, I don't want my grandkids coming up to me and saying in 15, 20 years' time, Grandad, where were you when this was happening? That's what keeps coming back to me all the time. I don't like extremism. I believe extremism from one side breeds extremism from the other. My problem is with this Labour group at the moment. Over 100 Labour MPs are part of an extreme Labour socialist group called the Fabian Society, who believe that socialism should be created very gently, behind the scenes, shall we say. Their logo is a wolf in sheep's clothing. That's what we have in this Labour group at the moment.
Do you think that's the problem? Do you think a march towards socialism is the issue, Graeme?
Absolutely, because they don't believe in borders. They say they do, but these people are internationale. They're international socialists. They don't believe in borders. And that's why you've got these extreme people in government now on the Labour side who are creating this disorder, deliberately pulling down the social fabric of this country. And I sincerely believe that. I'm no conspiracy theorist. I just look at what's happening.
Yeah. Well, and you don't need to be a conspiracy theorist to see what's happening. And Graeme, I'm sure you'll have seen what's happened in Waterlooville, what's happened in lots of different places where people, they're not right-wing extremists, they're not left-wing extremists either, they're not extremists of any kind. They're simply people who care about what's happening to their country and to their town or their village or their city. And Graeme, I wonder if you feel anyone is actually listening, because when people come out on the streets, that is usually a indication that they don't feel they're being listened to.
Well, that's correct, but they are being listened to, but they're being ignored. That's the issue. They know what's going on, they know the feedback that's coming in, but they ignore it because they have an agenda. And and it's not just me saying this, it's people I talk to. They're saying, what's happened to Labour? Because I'm an old Labour voter. I used to vote Labour. I can't believe how far Labour have gone to the left. They've gone past me. They've gone past old Labour voters. It's ridiculous. And the Conservatives...
Do you think Starmer's in control, Graeme, or is he being manipulated?
He's being manipulated.
Okay.
Behind the scenes, I believe, I've got no proof of it, but I believe he's being manipulated. Lord Harmer and people like that are also manipulators. Okay. When you think about it, Starmer's in the Fabian Society. Also, so is Tony Blair. He's in the Fabian Society. So is our great health secretary. He's in the Fabian Society. And so it goes on.
Okay.
These people are extremist people. And as soon as the Labour people, like Sean the Sheeple, as soon as he actually understands this, we won't go any further. They'll keep on voting Labour.
Just to be clear for us both, Graeme, legally we're not implying that those people are extremists in any way. We're implying that they have a political philosophy that obviously Graeme and I both disagree with. Graeme, thanks for your call. I appreciate it. Really good call. Thanks, mate. Robert in Colchester has been in touch. 0344 499 1000. Robert, you're very welcome to the programme. Immigration on your mind as well?
Oh, isn't it just? First of all, I've never voted in my life until Reform come along. I'm 67 years old.
Never voted before?
Sorry?
You never voted before, then you voted Reform?
Well, they've been absolutely useless, haven't they? While I've been growing up and working,
okay,
Labour or Conservative have done nothing for normal people.
Okay.
They've always catered for the rich or middle class. First of all, I'd like to thank Keir Starmer because he's done more for reform, recruitment, than anyone else. So that's the only thing he's done right. My main thing is, okay, I believe we should, if it's one in, one out, as soon as the boat arrives, they should be taken straight back to France.
Mm-hmm.
But the other question is, why aren't they being electronically tagged? I mean, technically, they're criminals. They're coming over here illegally. So why are they not being electronically tagged? I take it they are photographed and fingerprinted.
How are we going to monitor so many people, 25,000 people? That would take a huge amount of monitoring, would it not?
Yes, but how can they monitor them when they give them money?
Yeah,
I mean, they don't just give them a one-off payment.
Yeah.
They pay them all the time. So if they're electronically tagged, we can find where they're going, find what they're doing. I mean, the main problem is getting them out of Britain again.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, my parents came here legally back in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
When they came here, they had to work. If they didn't work, they had nothing.
And well, you're absolutely right. And that fairness issue is absolutely at the heart of all of this. Listen, thanks for your call, Robert. I appreciate that. I want to get to Patricia in just a second, if I can fit her in before the end of the programme. I just want to read a couple of messages. First, Barry says, veterans are treated like trash by this country for decades. Nothing will change. Stephen Millings in Belfast says, if Starmer was half on his brief as Caroline Levitt is in the White House, we'd all be okay. And Rob has been in touch and says, Cardi P, you'd love Minority Report. It's a very clever film. In regard to Sean, no words, tee-hee, says Rob. Maybe I'll give Minority Report a go. Craig in Sunderland says, I worshipped Ozzy Osbourne. I'm not surprised he was buried in his garden. After all, how would the Prince of Darkness be buried on consecrated ground, says Craig in Sunderland. That's a fair point. Let's speak to Patricia in Bolton, see if we can get her in before the news. Patricia, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good evening, Peter. Nice to talk to you.
Hi there.
Listening to most of the other comments that I agree with, I've got a new name for this government.
Mm-hmm.
The useful idiot in Westminster, useful for anyone who wants to do this country harm.
Right. Yes. Well, listen, I think a lot of people will agree with you. Do you think they've got anything right over the last year?
No.
And plenty of things wrong.
And a lot of people voted for them in good faith because Conservatives didn't do a lot for us either.
Yeah.
It's disgusting what's going on. I'm absolutely appalled.
What do you think they should do? If you could get Keir Starmer to do one thing, what would it be, Patricia?
Listen to people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Meet them. Listen to them.
Okay. Well, Patricia, thank you very much for your call. Just finally, we actually have time for another call, which is Mark in Lincolnshire, 0344 499 1000. Mark, you're very welcome to the show. What would you like to say?
Hi there, Peter.
Hi there.
Hi there. Yeah, obviously this whole situation with the veterans and the migrants, it's always a difficult one, I think, to be honest, if I'm totally frank about it, because people are always going to ring up, they're always, you know, oh, get them out of the hotels, well, then what?
Yeah, where do they go? Yeah.
Then they're in social housing, then they're in private rented accommodation for which the landlords get a higher rate of rent, so, you know, local people, you know, in other words, the natives are going to be stuffed either way.
But surely the answer is just to get the processing right, to sort this out, and then to have some sort of deterrent.
Well, the answer is, as you hear in the protests themselves, you know, that Waterlooville one, you know, send them home. That's what the people want. I'm actually really quite pleased that that's the rhetoric that's coming out of these protests now, because people are actually realising, you know, we're not talking about getting them out of hotels anymore. We're talking about we want them out of the damn country. They have no right to be here. We do not want them here. And I'm not just talking your 20-odd thousand that have been here this, you know, that have come over this year. I'm talking about the 200-odd thousand that have been coming here for the last 5-6 years. The whole damn lot of them, whether they've been given indefinite leave to remain, whether they've been given citizenship, don't give a stuff. Cancel it, revoke it,